Broken down and defeated, deterred, busy and confused, sleeping. You're dying while I wait till it started. On the journey chosen, wasted, no selected. I was so bad, what happened? Fall out of the sky. Crush me in my smile. I was so bad at what happened. Fall out of the sky and crush me in my smile. Sober, sad and jaded. Then upcoming, they're broken down and defeated. You are dying while I wait to get started. You are dying while I wait to get started. I was so bad at what happened. Fall out of the sky, yeah. Crush me in my smile. I was so bad at what happened. Fall out of the sky and crush me in my smile.
I'm a motherfucking unicorn, a one-of-one. The vibe being of love and light, the enlightened one. My karma isn't just stellar, I live by truth. Fighting evil, my scars are living proof. Protecting you from the storms with all my might. Love me, I will treat you right. You ever cross me, it's the last thing you'll ever do. With my crown of thorns, I'll wreck you. I ain't playing, yo, Bryan hard, call me a saint. Too bad Chris, because Bigfoot knows my name. I'm a messenger of God, with loyalty I serve, taking out all evil with his holy word. A true Knights Templar, sword in hand, slice you up, bury you in the sand. I'm a motherfucking unicorn, you'll never find anyone like me. Born in the Bronx, raised in NYC, so listen up, take heed. I float like a butterfly, sting like a bee. A true Knights Templar, sword in hand, slice you up, bury you in the sand. I'm a motherfucking unicorn, you'll never find anyone like me. Born in the Bronx, raised in NYC, so listen up, take heed. I float like a butterfly, sting like a bee.
Welcome, everybody. Third Eye Live, Wednesday, May 21st, 2025. Sorry about that. It's been a long while. I've driven through tornado. My car was totaled from hail. Almost got killed today. So I'm just thankful to be here with everybody. I want to thank Bigfoot Michigan Rob and Krista from Blondes and Booze for I was on their show the other night and yesterday, and they got me well over, they pushed me over the 300 mark. So I can't thank them enough, for doing that for me. And I appreciate, just the love that was given. So I'm going to keep doing what I'm doing. I'm traveling next week. I'm just going to let you know that, but I do have a great show. Previously, it's either going to be my Nobo Boomy show rerun with a great guest or with Ron the Crypto Guru Murphy. But speaking of Marks, we're going to add our co-host Mark Eddy to the broadcast. Look how pretty he is tonight, folks. Only joking. Mark has a book, and Mark is going to be a guest as well. Mark's been making the rounds, right? I think you've been making the rounds. There it is. And it's available. We'll figure out a way to get you an autographed copy from Mark Eddy.
I just got the box of books just
the other day.
Yeah.
Sometimes it takes forever, right?
Yeah. Well, I have people I need to get complimentary copies to them, but there'll be another box or two ordered, and start getting those out to other people, and hopefully more museums and libraries who really contributed a lot to this project.
Oh yeah, I mean, I was amazed. I saw Mark on what's the show that you were on with Sam and
Cole's Paranormal.
Cole's Paranormal. Those guys put on a great show as well, and Mark was fantastic on it. I mean, it was just a wonderful broadcast, and so go check it out. I can share it as well. I don't know what you're talking about, Harlan. With there's King Crab. I mean, I've been crabby lately, but I want to thank everybody for joining us. Everybody trickles in. It's really interesting. One of the reasons why I wish I could consolidate my YouTube channels. Is because I'd have like a couple thousand people and everybody be notified. They only let you do so much with certain things, but I think more interaction with the chat, and I hope Laura's doing well. Nana, she's great, but I'm thankful. We've got JV from Paranormal Newfoundland Podcast. You got John Strawdog, who lives in New Hampshire. John, you can take the bike and go there, because we're just not going to waste any more time. We are talking America's Stonehenge, and the gentleman who, I guess you inherited it, Dennis Stone, is here with us tonight, and he is the owner of. Well, your family is the owner of the property, but you're the president, I think, of the corporation, right? How does that work, John, Dennis?
Yeah. Well, good evening, Mark and Bryan. Thank you for having me on this evening.
Pleasure.
Yeah, it was my dad back in '55. They got the place. You heard about it on a radio show, just like we're doing right now. It was a big station out of Boston, and he ended up opening it up in '58, and I was 4 years old. So I've been around it pretty much my whole life. And then he passed away in '09, so it passed on to myself. And I have a son named Kelsey. He's an engineer at AT. My dad was an engineer at AT&T Bell Labs. My son's an engineer at Raytheon. But he's there quite a bit when he's off from his, normal job, and he comes over and he helps out. And then I have a granddaughter, so perhaps it will hopefully stay in the family, through my granddaughter and beyond. But it's this year is the 70th year my dad first learned about the site and visited it, so kind of an anniversary date.
Well, it's fantastic. It's been 70 years in the family. I mean, with so many different things transpiring over the time, all these old, go-to places. Let's try to keep America's Stonehenge in business. Go up and visit. It's in Salem, New Hampshire. Go visit it. It's a fun place. It's not just the prehistoric side, the alpacas and the digging, but we're going to get into it because what I love is you were running around that place when you were 4 years old. What a place,
Still are.
you remember that used to be my fort, but now it's actually like that's
Yeah.
place.
It will be to my dying day, I think, so.
Oh,
But
yeah.
it's a joke. And we live actually right next to the property. We bought the property here back in 85, built a house 86 in a cul-de-sac, which abutted the property. And my dad's house was on the other side of on the north alignment, actually. He built the house here in 1990. And when he died, my son got his house. There was still a mortgage on it. And then eventually my son moved next door to us, even closer. So my granddaughter's right next door to us. So we're
Right.
on the kind of on the summer solstice sunset. It runs about
That's
800
great.
feet from the main. We're about 900 feet maybe or so from the main site where I'm sitting right now. I can kind of look up at the
Yeah.
hill where the place is. And my son can do the same thing out of the back of his house too. So we are here.
That's fantastic. I like what inspired your father to say, "Hey, I'm gonna go buy this place," and I would just love to be the fly on the wall with your mom, or if there was any, like, what are you doing?
Yeah, there was a little bit. There definitely was that. In fact, what she said is you got rocks in your head after the first time they visited the site, because he went inside and visited the site, and while he was inside, where the main site is, there's a big chain link fence that was put up in 1937. It's still there today. He crawled under it. My aunt, uncle, and my mom stayed outside waiting for him for probably, an hour or so. And he came out, he was just blown away completely by the site. And in passing, he mentioned he would love to get involved with the research, study, investigation, and maybe someday open this place up to him as a museum, or maybe own it and operate it. Then my mom came out with, "You got rocks in your head," because he had a lot on his plate at that time. I had a sister on the way. He had a new job at AT&T Bell Labs, and they were actually building a home themselves. I mean, physically building a home themselves up in Derry, about 8 miles from here. So, and he was going to Merrimack College, and so he had a lot of things going on. And I guess maybe she was right. He did have rocks in his head, and after that, he just never stopped, So,
But did you? I mean, like, there must have been something. Like, I come from a family where my father used to collect rocks. So he used to collect Inuit art, which is a primitive based culture, and they do carvings out of sandstone. And my mother's like, "You're a rock collector." She didn't, it's like, "We need this," and you're buying stones. The dynamic between husband and wives is just beyond. You can't go with that. But there had to have been something that was a calling. Like, come on, you see it and you're like, "There's a pile of rocks there. I'm going to buy this."
Well, his last name is Stone, so that might have been part of it,
Yeah,
So
that does help.
well, a little bit, yeah, it does help a little bit. But he always had an interest in the past. He was up in Canada with the U.S. Coast Guard before he became an AT&T Bell Labs engineer. And he was right up in Labrador, right across from Newfoundland, where the Vikings landed. But he was there around 1950 to 53, so he was a little too early before the discovery of Lonzo Meadow. And if he had known about it, obviously he would have gone over and take a peek at it, because that was one of his passengers' history, Native Americans, the Vikings, that kind of thing. So he grew up with that interest, So I guess that was there. The name was there. And then we heard about this on that radio show a couple days later at a barber shop in the same town where we lived in Derry, New Hampshire. He was waiting to have his hair done. He picks up a magazine, just flipping through it, and all of a sudden he sees photographs, and there's a whole story in this magazine all about the same place. Coincidentally, he had heard on a Friday night, and the show was called Alton Hall. Excuse me, the talk show host was Alton Hall Blackington. He was from Maine originally, and he's doing the show out of Boston. It's actually on different radio shows syndicated around New England too. At that time, it was a Friday night 7:30 show, and he listened to it until that night. And then a few days later, he sees the magazine, and he says to the barber, his name is Warren Haywood. He used to race horses at Salem and Rockingham Racetrack, which ran for 100 years. But he was a horse racer and a barber. And so Warren says to my dad, "Well, how old is that magazine?" He goes, "Well, it's 1952. It's 3 years old. It's been sitting here." And he goes, "You can have it. Take it." That weekend at my aunt and uncle's house, about 10 people playing cards. My dad passed it around. All local people. They looked at it. Nobody knew what this place was either. Just like my dad and my mom. However, my aunt and uncle, my mom's sister, and her husband actually used to come here in the 1930s picnicking up on those in the chambers, right on top of the site. So that's another little coincidence there. So my dad's next question is, can you find the place? And they're like, well, it's been 20 years. We haven't been there, So that Sunday morning, they drove around North Salem, New Hampshire. There's no road signs to the place. It's not open to the public. It was private property. There was archaeological work going on, and particularly that year, they did a 6-week project on archaeology with Dr. Gary Vesalius from Yale University, who had been here in the 40s digging, but he came back and did a 6-week project. So my dad, when they drove around, they saw an old dirt road my aunt and uncle recognized. They took a chance trespassing up half a mile into the woods up a hill. And when they got to the top, there was a site. And then my dad climbed into the fence, and the rest is history, basically. But he loved it. He loved that kind of thing. That was just in his blood, just an interest he always had.
If he was into, we have from the paranormal Newfoundland podcast and Boots on the Ground team. That's Jen, and I'm sure she would love to talk to you as well on her show. She's from she's a Newfie. Well, she has a little Texas in her too. So
okay, yeah. Oh, that's great.
Yeah. So, but I understand that if your dad was into stuff with, you get into Vikings and you get into the Nordics and their path from where they are, Greenland and the Netherlands, and they come down into Labrador, Newfoundland or Newfoundland. I get yelled at if I don't pronounce it. Yeah, I don't pronounce it right. Yeah. And Texas, Newfie here, Dennis. So there she is. And I'll set a message up and see if we can get you on that. But I understand that because this is out of the ordinary. This is like, why is this here? And there's a friend of mine who does paranormal stuff, associate. We're not like buddy. And Linda did a book on the stone chambers in New York State, and we had stone chambers that pockmarked the states. And she just came to the conclusion that it's a cold cellar made by Native Americans, and I'm like, nope. Your site, America's Stonehenge, there's astronomical alignments to it, right?
There is. We started that research in 1965, so that is true. And a lot of the other sites that are located in the Northeast seem to have alignments with the solstices or equinoxes or cross-quarter days. Some are lunar alignments too. But today we know of about 57 alignments with our sites. So I don't know if Mark's got something he's holding up there right now.
Mark is holding it up. Yes, Mark has props, but Mark has a book there, and it kind of pull it back a little bit, Mark.
If I get too close, it gets pixelated.
I'm gonna swap you out. Put it back up there again. Pull it back. I'll tell you when back right there.
Okay, this one is the winter solstice,
right?
And you were Scott featured you doing observing the summer solstice sunrise,
right?
So there's two examples that men in the audience have already seen,
right? So you had Scott Walters on the broadcast, your broadcast. There's a ton of different shows that you've been on. And with did you get an extensive time to talk with Scott?
Well, Scott actually, Scott's been to our site many times. He was here a year ago on the equinox doing a special 12-hour event at our site.
Yep.
That's the day that Ronnie LeBlanc was supposed to come up from Expedition Bigfoot. He's been to our site before too to do a evening stargazing with storytelling. And unfortunately, Ronnie had an emergency in the middle of the night before, I guess it was 3:30 in the morning. So he couldn't show up for that. But Scott's been coming, I think I would say 2009, the year my dad came. They did a thing about the Lost Templars. It was a 2-hour, it was a History Channel documentary. And then they followed it up.
I think it's America's
And then he had
Unearthed.
that came out in 2012. That was the next. Actually, he had two documentaries he was part of. One was the one I mentioned about the Knights Templar, and the other one, I forget the actual title. That was in 2009, and then 2 years later they did one. Who were the first Americans? I think. And then Scott got his show running on History Channel. Then it moved over to Travel Channel for Discovery Network.
Right.
And now he's on Gaia TV. So we met Scott. I would say I met Scott at least. He comes about every other year to our place, roughly. So we see him quite often. And he did us in 2012. It aired in 2013. And that's when my son showed the alignment of going over to Stonehenge. It was something my son Kelsey found. And he was going to college for engineering, and he had his college break, and he was just playing around on the computer while he had a little free time, and he just taken out the alignments across New England and beyond. And when he got to the summer solstice sunrise, he says, "Oh, let's follow that out to Maine and beyond, beyond Newfoundland and Nova Scotia, actually." And he went across the ocean, and he came out to southern England, and he's been to Stonehenge a couple times, with us. So he said, "Yeah, that's interesting." As he changed the scale, he kept blowing it up, and it turns out near Salisbury, England, and then he keeps blowing it up, and all of a sudden Stonehenge appears. He blows it up a little more, and the line goes right through the center of one of the trilithons. And that, of course, Scott's show kind of featured that on that particular episode. We're episode number 6 on this first year. So,
I mean, a couple of my brothers, I'm in a fraternity. Society with secrets, not a secret society. And
Scott's a Mason. Scott's a Mason, yeah.
Yeah, so am I. And I'm trying to get. I'm going to be getting in touch with him to have him stop by here, because, I mean, the stuff that the man knows and what he was doing, just in Kensington, Stone alone, it blows your mind. Yeah. But for him to come to your property shows that there is a significance there at America's Stonehenge, and it plays a role in whomever was really coming through. I don't think this was, I mean, did you, when you, as you got older and you started like really looking into it, and then the kids started looking at, your sons and your daughters, everybody's looking into it. You feel that like this is bigger than it really is, and no one's giving it the proper attention? Because I think it's huge, actually.
Yeah, you stole the words out of my mouth. I mean, we've been feeling like that for a while, and as time gets on, we get a little bit older, and there's a bit of frustration there, because this could rewrite the history books for one thing, and all you look at the totality of just this 110-acre site, what's on it,
Right.
The amount of work that went into quarrying the stones, moving stones, and building all the features, including the main site, all the different structures, and the astronomical alignments too. And then we have walls that are shaped like serpent walls. We've been finding those since 2016. My dad never knew about those. We have 16 of those since 2016. One of them is 2,550 feet around. We think it's an Ouroboros. The shortest one is the first one I found, actually. It looks like it's got a tapered body. It's on a ridge of bedrock. I just happened to be riding my ATV by there. It was on the way to my dad's old house, and it was about 60 feet off the trail. And the woods kind of hit it a little bit, but I could see it enough to say, just the way the light struck it that day. And I had seen this wall many times, but this particular day, the way the light struck it, I said, well, that looks peculiar. So I got off. I walked over about 60 feet. I look at it, and I'm looking at the wall. The front of it seems to have what I would consider now the head has a rock that seemed to have slipped down. It originally was horizontal. Then it has a body that tapered down almost 30 feet to a flat rectangular stone with round corners. And this is all on a ridge of bedrock, And I'm looking at it going, I think I'm looking at a snake. But I thought it was either seeing things like pareidolia, you see faces in clouds, or my imagination's running away. But I kept looking at it. I went on the other side of it, looked at it, went back on the other side. I said, I think I got a snake here, but I'd never heard of a stone wall shaped like a snake. I knew about Serpent
Right.
Mound, and there were others. I never heard of a stone wall like that. I showed it to Scott, as a matter of fact, in 2016. He was with Alan Butler. He's on TV quite a bit on History Channel. He's from England. And he was over with his wife, visiting Scott, and David Brody, an author, and about maybe 15 people. And I took him on a little tour in the spring of 2016 after I believe I found about 3 different serpent walls, possible ones by then. And I showed him that one. I showed him the S-shaped one. It's about 140 feet long. And I showed him another one. And they were like They do look like serpents, but I don't even know if they had known about it. But later, Scott, on one of his episodes in Scotland, had a stone wall that's shaped like a snake also. So now we know these serpent walls since 2016 actually go from here to Weed, California. Weed, California, right by Mount Shasta, Redding area. I got 110 photographs of that area. There's got the chevron-shaped walls, like we have chevron. We have two of those. Right. Zigzag-shaped walls, and then they have the serpentine walls. And then we found out east of Denver have cairns, chambered cairns, and a D-shaped wall, like the letter D. And we can get back to that later. We have one shaped like that at us. It's a big area shaped like the letter D. They're in other sites in New England, particularly in Connecticut. But they're at that same site east of Denver, just below Nebraska, the very flat land. And the woman did a whole PowerPoint presentation, and we were at an archaeological meeting down in Groton, Connecticut. And she shows us her serpentine walls. My wife and I elbowed each other. She did it by Skype. Unfortunately, we couldn't talk to her in person. There was about 100 people there, and there were a few questions asked afterwards, but you couldn't really get your words. There was just so many people there. But she's got serpentine walls there. They're up in Winnipeg. They're in Alabama. The Hudson Valley, as we were talking before the show, Dutchess, Westchester, Orange, and Putnam County have sites that my dad visited back in the 60s. We went, as kids, we didn't go to Disneyland. We went to see a bunch of old chambers, But now we fell in love with them since then. But, as kids, you want to go see maybe Disneyland or something. Yeah. So our summers were spent seeing that. And I appreciate it so much now than I might have back then. But we didn't know they had serpent walls until the last 10 years in that Hudson Valley. They are finding them there. They're in Connecticut. That's over 400 serpent walls. They're just in Pennsylvania, and they're in Kentucky. In fact, one in Kentucky has a big wide mouth. It's a stone wall with a big wide mouth. It's like one of ours, and Mark's been to my site. But I don't think in 2014, Mark, that was 2 years before we found the serpents. So I couldn't show you any because we didn't know about
it. He needs a road trip anyhow.
Yeah.
Yeah, he needs a road trip, another road trip,
Yeah, just about anywhere. And I'd put returning to America's Stonehenge at the top of the list.
It's a great trip. And then, when you can say hello to Dennis, you hang out, you go see some serpents, you write another book, his book.
Yeah, sounds good.
And then maybe you write a book, like put a couple of chapters in about America's Stonehenge. And then you go to the outlets and then you eat lobster.
Actually, New Hampshire.
Yes, you get some of that. But something that's very interesting about the serpent is that throughout history, especially in North and South America, the serpent is very prevalent. And then when you move to the Pacific, but something I've noticed, not an archaeologist, I did study physics and astronomy at the University of Massachusetts in Amherst, which I later found out after the fact that they have their own mounds there, and giants were discovered there, which is pretty interesting. Oh, they took a foot cleanse there. We took a field trip in middle school from New Hampshire originally. So they went to the middle school went to America's Stonehenge. There you go.
That's great. Yeah. We love having school children. During COVID, we lost them. They're all starting to come back. We just had 30 kids today, and we had 150 last week. So we're starting to get the groups back, and we got one, I think, on Friday, and it's going to be raining Friday. So hopefully it works out for the kids, So we love school groups.
Tell them to bring a raincoat because what? Something that's actually very important when you go to American Stonehenge, you get the big. I always call it the table. It's a big table with the channels around it, and it's very interesting that when it rains, then you could see where the channel runs to and why it may run that way.
Exactly.
And so we have a question actually right here from our Newfoundland friend. Are there pictures of the serpent rocks? And I think Mark has something, so I'm going to drag Mark over to where Dennis's square is.
Well, I was just saying, there's the
pull back a little bit. There you go. No, that's good. That's the table we're talking on the left, and then
the sacrificial table.
The sacrificial. Well, we don't know what it is. And
it's been called many things. Yeah.
Right. It could.
Ceremonial table.
Right. You could have put a deer there, or they could have used it to separate the meat and the lifeblood, which would be the blood, and use that for certain things too. Jen, if you
I
get a chance,
I don't know if this will show up. It may not
that will
show up
show
too
up.
well. Yeah, I can't. It's actually, maybe I can go a little closer there. It's not a very,
It's
now
perfect.
this, it looks good in my book, but on there, that's a S-shaped serpent. It's kind of hard to see the background, but it goes in a big sweeping S for about 140 feet. And we've been walking by that wall since 1974 when we opened up that particular pathway on the astronomical trail. And my dad did a whole report on that little part of the trail being open, and we never noticed that it had a serpent shape to it whatsoever. People have been walking by it since, well, over 50, well, by 2016, 46 years, and nobody noticed it. It's a
Well,
big, beautiful serpent sitting right on the bedrock, with a triangular head.
yeah, like you said, Dennis, you're driving your ATV through, and the light hits it the right way, and you catch something that you must have passed 100,000 times, and
Well,
then you
yeah,
see,
exactly.
and
Yeah.
it's almost as if someone. Thank you for today, by the way, saving my life and my friend's mom. Someone says you need to see this, and then they open your eye or your third eye, like that's what the show is, Third Eye Live. What this is, what one of the premises of why I do this. I don't always want to do paranormal or strange or booze and ghosts and stuff. I want people to go to places that are important, and I loved your site. I want to go back up there. It's just that traffic during the summer will kill you.
Yeah,
We're New York.
yeah. October is pretty much our biggest month. It used to be in the 50s to probably the 90s. The summer was our biggest time, but now it's October with the fall foliage. So it's one of the best times to visit. No mosquitoes. The air is crisp, clear. But it gets busy up here, and the hotels get a little more packed and more expensive. I think that for that month, But you were at our site, and and Mark was at our site, and yet you didn't see any serpent walls that I know of, and that's the same with us. Every day we didn't see them, and then our eyes are trained. We're looking closer now. A little brush can conceal them. Even in the winter when the leaves fall, for some reason, a few trees here and there kind of make it less obvious as to what you're looking at. But once you see them, you can't forget them, and then you start to see them. It's weird. In 2016, a book called Ceremonial Stonework by Mark Starr out of Connecticut, North Stonehenge, Connecticut, a beautiful town. Yep. He was there 30 years at that time. He writes for Yankee Magazine. He's also he's a freelance photographer, book writer, writes about fishing villages in New England. After 30 years in 2016, he said, he had already prepared for this, and he put the book together called Ceremonial Stonework. I picked it up at that particular meeting down in Groton, Connecticut. I said, this has got to be the whole Northeast. There's 8,000 structures, 270 photographs, 25 categories of different types of structures. And as I looked at it closer, I realized it was just the one town in North Stonington. My dad was really into this really heavy, and I don't remember him mentioning North Stonington. All the other Groton, Danbury, Moodus, Thompson, and just goes on. All these, including there is a North Salem, Connecticut with a structure too, like North Salem, New York, and North Salem, New Hampshire. But he never mentioned North Stonington. There are 8,000 structures in that one. There's over 400 serpent walls in that one town. They range from 30 feet up to 300 feet. The average is around 90 to 100. They're linear, rectilinear, they're curvilinear. Some at our site look like the Ouroboros. We have 3 that look like it's biting its tail. So that's an ancient symbol overseas, but I've seen Native American artwork out west for that too, kind of a circular serpent kind of
It's
thing.
Infinity. It's the equivalent of infinity, circle of life. And it's kind of like the saying, what separates us in life unites us in death. And death was always, if you go back to, I guess, cultures prior to we classify modern, they were a lot more spiritual in their own way, not necessarily through an organized religion, but they knew death was, just but the beginning of, to Valhalla. I mean, I'm sure your father must have, clean your room to Valhalla, going in there like that. And it's just so interesting how they're finding this. I think there's some in Pennsylvania. There's other places, but there was a ton of them in New York State. And like on your property, so you have 100+ acres, right?
That's correct. Yeah. About 106 acres. Yeah. roughly.
And Mark was mentioning something about you have you did some, I think, was it LiDAR? Is it LiDAR like
Yeah.
scans or?
Yeah, we've been really fortunate since 2020. We get the first gentleman from Connecticut, actually, Suffield, Connecticut, that gave me a call. In 2020, I think around January, it was cold January, New Hampshire day, and he gave me a call, and he introduced himself, and he told me a little bit about his background. He had his master's. He was a landscape architect, but he was just getting into LiDAR like the year before that. And he bought a
Right.
handheld unit, $50,000 unit, and he walks around with it, so he can get inside chambers with it. He can walk around and get things horizontally, the walls up close, and it can see down to a centimeter. It puts out something like 300,000 points per cubic, per cubic square, basically meter square, I should say. And I get a resolution down about 1 centimeter. Has 16 lasers that go out 80 meters. But
Right.
he offered to come up and do part of the hilltop, and I said, well, we'd be more than happy to have you. So over the next couple months, we worked out a schedule. He's about a little over 2 hours away. So he had to come up a couple of times, actually, and his back was pretty bad at the time. He just had surgery in the last year, and he's doing much better. But he actually put all this equipment on, carrying it all around, and he went inside the chambers, the chamber that where the roof slab collapsed. He went inside
Right.
some other smaller things, and after he came several times, he had all that data. He had a super computer he bought or whatever, but then he bought the software in Montreal, and he spent quite a bit of time going through it before he gave us a terabyte of hard drive of data, and he did 16 acres. The last year, we had a gentleman that lives in New Hampshire, and he's actually originally from the same town that our LiDAR, Tom Elmore, lives in Connecticut, a quarter of a mile away. It's like, what the heck? What a coincidence, right? So this guy is an
Seriously,
engineer.
think about that.
Yeah. There's a lot of coincidences, yeah, and I just learned that like a week and a half ago that they live. His mom is still living there. She's only a quarter mile from Tom, but he had the drone type, and he works for a company GPI. They're from Maine to Florida, but he's based in Salem, New Hampshire. He visited with his girlfriend. She actually pulled him over to go see the site. I guess she had revisited us and liked us. And once he saw the site, he came back down. He introduced himself to me. I think when he went up, my wife waited on him. He told me who he was, what he did. And he said, I think this site would be a great candidate to do the entire hilltop with LiDAR, if you'd like, with a drone. And he goes, I got a small drone, and then I have one that's like a $90,000, and that includes the LiDAR and the high definition cameras and everything. I said, that would be wonderful. So he came back in December, picked a calm day. It was clear. The leaves were already gone, of course. And he went all day. He was up there with a small one. And then he laid out all these GPS pads all over the hill with a big GPS pole. So everything is precisely GPSed, if you will.
Yep.
And now the neat thing is I've introduced both of our LiDAR guys together, and they want to actually blend the whole 106 acres with the 16 acres, because the 16 acres really has the inside of the chambers, and it's really, really close.
Smart.
And so we think we can do that. But Tom, the first guy, actually is a friend with the ground penetration radar. She lives in Waltham, Mass. So she came up in 2020. And then she was up here about almost 2 months ago doing more. After 5 years, she finally came back and did more for us. And she has software. She's going to blend her imaging under the subsurface with the LiDAR. And that's kind of a cool thing to do, too. The Newport Tower in Rhode Island, I think she already did that with Tom already. But our site will, it'll be amazing when they do that, because we'll have all this data right in front of us to use, And then we can record all the serpent walls very precisely, all the other walls. And we have windows, too. These are beautiful lintel. A lot of them have sills, rectangular shape, and there's a couple that are not rectangular shape. But we have 36 of those all over the hilltop, and we found those since 2016, too. 2016 was kind of a cool year. I just retired from the airlines. I flew for 42 years. I ended up with American Airlines as a captain. And when I retired, I'm like, I know what I'm going to do. I work at the Hill. I hope it's exciting, because flying is a whole lifestyle. You're away from home all the time, and it's kind of fun.
Right.
You miss home every now and then, but it's a lot of fun. Then come home, and then you go over to the museum and fix all the broken things, which is a weekly thing pretty much. But and I kind of miss some of that flying. I did it, like I say, 42 years. But that's the year we started finding the serpent walls. Then I found my first stone window, and then that's one of the categories that I saw in Mark and Starr's book. So when we saw his book, I'm like, he's got serpents here, just like us. And then I flipped through it. He's got windows. And these windows are all over the Northeast too. North Stonington's loaded. The Berkshires have them. Even Martha's Vineyard has a perch stone or a dolmen. And back in 1989, a book called Manitou came out by Byron Dix and James Mayberg Jr. They were members of my dad's group. They're both passed away now, but they were both engineers actually too. And in Martha's Vineyard, there's actually the windows down there. They called them, they had a name for them back then, a wind window. They called it a wind window. Well, that's a term they used back in '89.
Right.
And today we call them soul holes. We really don't know. We call them spirit windows. They are in England too, and there are serpentine walls in that same area in Dartmoor, England, and they're called spirit holes. They think the spirits flowed through them. That's one of the ideas over there. We don't really know for sure. You know.
No, you don't. I mean, it's interesting as a pilot. Have you? I was going to ask, you know, because of your background flying, have you taken trips around the property? Like I'm going to go rent a Cessna for a little bit, and
that's how I built. That's how I built my flying time. I started flying in '74 in January, yeah, once I got my private license in the summer of '74, I could take people up, and then we could start sharing expenses. And then I worked on my instrument rating, commercial, and so on and so forth over the years. So a lot of times I take people up, and we would take up other researchers. We go up to Vermont because Vermont is absolutely loaded with these chambers too, you know. And we go up there and we would photograph what we could see. We did the Newport Tower. We did a sunken archway that's supposed to be off the coast, right where the Newport Tower is. It was reported. I just read another story about that. But in the late '70s, or mid to late '70s, we were doing a lot. Even our site, we went up and we photographed it. But it was photographed by the gentleman my dad bought the property from back. We have aerial photographs going back to 1938 and 39 of the property too. It was right around the time of the '38 hurricane too, so a lot of the trees came down, you know. So we have a lot of aerial photographs going back to the '30s. But in the '70s, I would even take my uncle up. He was Raytheon Sanders, which became Sanders Lockheed. He was an engineer too. But in World War II, he flew B-17s, got shot down in Belgium, was actually almost captured by the Germans. His plane, actually, he was a co-pilot, and that comes up on my phone. It used to come up on my phone once in a while about them. It was in Stars and Stripes magazine because they all bailed out of the plane. It was so shot up, the B-17. But that plane made it back to its base without any crew, and they didn't have any kind of autopilots back in those days, you know, auto land, nothing. And that plane made it back and landed, and the ground crew came out. They chalked the wheels, and they're waiting for the crew to come out, and they're waiting and waiting. Finally, I guess somebody went inside, and there's no crew. It's like how it became the ghost flight or something. But my uncle doesn't get mentioned much because he was a co-pilot instead of the captain, you know. He became a captain eventually, yeah.
In World War II, my best friend, his brother-in-law's father was a ball turret gunner.
Oh.
And you want to talk about a hairy seat and a hairy position because of his size. That was locking you in that turret and
you were sitting tight back there too. Wow. Yeah, I was going to say that's a really that you're sitting duck right back.
That's a tight position to be in.
Front or back. It's tough.
I just think, you know, like we're you know, with this LiDAR technology, and a couple of people have said it, and I was going to say it is a game changer. You know, it's a huge game changer because we're now able to start uncovering some of these mysteries. Like, it's unfortunate, like you mentioned in one of the videos, that the property was bigger at one point where the site is. And what they did over the years on, you know, they didn't care. They just quarried rock and put it in. Right now, there could be like this really crucial piece of a puzzle, you know, acting as the mantle on a fire in someone's fire pit.
It probably is, yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
And we've seen this because if I don't know if you ever watched the Oak Island stuff.
Yeah, I watch it once in a while. Yeah. More recently, I was watching it again. Yeah.
And they always are looking, because there was a lot of talk about the Templars coming in and different organizations and building these chambers, you know, going back 5,000 plus years or what have you. I think this goes back further than that, well further than that, by cultures that aren't even remotely close to being around anymore, or were basically fall into the thought pattern not really much information on it. But they've been to a couple people's homes, and in the back of the home is someone had, well, this rock has been here the whole time. We couldn't pick it up, so we left it. But it's actually a marker in relationship to a celestial calendar.
Oh yeah, yeah,
And
yeah.
it's just amazing. This is amazing stuff. When you go into New York State and you go to Balancing Rock, and this is a ginormous piece of rock that they said the glaciers pushed down, and it rests on about 3 to 4 other stones on top of it, and you can kind of like go underneath it. I've taken my kids there numerous times. We've done tests there privately. There is a little bit of an anomaly, an electromagnetic type of frequency in the area. And you, at this point, you don't know. It's kind of close to the roadway. You don't know it's running under the roadway for the most part. Have you guys checked, America Stonehenge for different types of frequency, or what the magnetic field is like over the property versus what others?
Yeah, that's a good question. Now, that area we haven't done too much of. I mean, I've heard of that. We had the people back in the 90s brought up their ground penetration radar. It's GSSI. That was made right down the street from us, a quarter of a mile. They moved over to Nashua, New Hampshire since, and GSSI is a pretty big company.
Oh, yeah.
Their sister company was Klein, and Klein makes a side scan sonar that helped find the Titanic Space Shuttle Challenger. They were sister companies for quite a while. They had a thing called a ski, and we have pictures of it in our visitor center. It looked kind of like a ski. It was electromagnetic kind of an instrument, and they did very little with that compared to the ground penetration radar. They did use that up more extensively. I would say going back about 32 years into the late 90s, they would bring customers in from all over the world, and they used our site to train. We thought that was fantastic because we got all that free, ground penetration radar. And then they moved down to downtown Salem, New Hampshire, and then they moved over to Nashua, New Hampshire, which is about 21 miles away. So we really need to do more with that. And by the way, I was just reading about the North Salem perch stone, or dolmen as we used to call it. That rock, they call it pink granite. And in this book I'm reading by Dr. Salvatore Trino, and we met him. I talked to him recently. He wrote the book in '78, The Search for Lost America. Very, very good book. He's from Spain, went to school at Oxford, and he came over here, started a group called the Middletown Archaeological Corporation, which is based out of Middletown, New York. I don't know if it's still going, but he's still around. He was a year ago anyway. He calls that, it's a pink granite. I don't know if Mark knew that, but the North Salem dolmen, or perch stone, is granite. That is from New Hampshire. They say that granite is, its source is New Hampshire and the White Mountains. So I thought that was, I don't know if that's been confirmed, but the legs are actually a crystalline, kind of a limestone, they call it, I believe it was. It's a different material totally. And they actually were looking at the megalithic yard, the unit of measure between the stones, which is something that we've kind of detected. And LiDAR can be very, very useful, especially handheld, where you can get down to a centimeter. And as Mark knows, one of the things we found out with that LiDAR is we have trapezoidal shapes at our site. And that was really revealed by that. When you look at the chamber in ruins with that multi-ton roof slab falling into it, Tom was able to climb around with his bad back and actually get the LiDAR. And it's actually trapezoid in shape the floor plan is. We thought it was rectangular. The patty chamber, which is another little structure that you probably went into when you visit, both you, is when you first come into the main site. The inside of that looks square corners or 90-degree corners, and it's kind of a rectangular square shape. It's almost square inside, but it's not. It's actually trapezoidal. The groove on the table you brought up earlier, we always thought it was a rectangular. It's trapezoidal. It's 9 inches narrower at the top than it is at the bottom. That's the first thing I detected. Actually, I found there's an alcove next to it. And I found out with actually measuring it. And then we got into the LiDAR. We started finding those other two things I mentioned. And then next to it's an alcove right next to the table where some people suggest it was an animal pen where the animal was kept before sacrifice. Your imagination can run around, but it has two little niches. We have no idea what it is, but it's next to the oracle chamber too. But it is actually trapezoidal floor plan. And then with the patty house that the farmer with his, I'm not actually, he was a shoemaker. Going back into the 1700s, he had a wooden house. It was rectangular, but actually, because of the sill plates of the walls, they're very wide. Uh, it is actually a trapezoid, but because it is so wide, it can accommodate a rectangular house. But if you get in there and measure that thing, it is not 90-degree corners. Most of our forefathers probably would have laid out something as a square rectangle using 90-degree corners. Roscoe Whitney, the engineer on the site back almost 90 years ago, he was under the William Goodwin, the guy that actually bought the property to do research in 1937. He said, I can't find square corners on this site. And I don't know if he was referring to what we discovered with the LiDAR, that there are trapezoidal shapes. He never mentioned trapezoidal, but the corners, he said they're not square, they're off. So the trapezoid shape is 5 different places we found on the site so far. So
that's actually interesting because visually you're looking at it like, oh, that's a square, right angle square. But when you get technical and a lot of times the technicalness is very important in determining certain things because it becomes a signature. One point there was someone who mentioned they were up, they look for hooked X's everywhere they go now because of Scott Walter and the Knights Templar. They have a certain hooked X. It's their way of signing their work. Like this is, and it could be up there in Newport, Kensington and Ruinstone, that has it. But shape is very important. It could be attributed to certain requirements that they were actually using the site for. Based on, if you want to get, let's get a little bit crazy and say when the Ark of the Covenant was built, it is precisely has to be built the way it was requested by God. And they were he was very specific to it. We don't know who dictated, like, why do you have trapezoid shapes there, but you also have trapezoid shapes in other places? Everything it's just, there must be meaning behind it. And thank God with the LiDAR, you're getting some stuff out of it. You did send some photos. So if you want me to go into them.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Well, that's what we call a V hut right there. The letter V is in Victor. And it faces the southwest. Most of the site is orientated true north, south, east, and west out of true north. Not magnetic, that varies and everything. But that faces the southwest, kind of towards the winter solstice sunset. It's not aligned with it, but it's facing kind of in that direction. I will say that in the 80s, or in the 70s actually, I got a book by Time Life all about the megaliths of Europe. And one of the structures that came up, one of their categories was called the wedge tomb, and they're in Ireland. They're also, by the way, in Spain too, but in Ireland, they always face southwest. Some of the ones in Ireland have a little flat wall, so they're like a little wedge almost. But my dad and I went over there back in '82. We went over Europe a few times before I met my wife, and then I began bringing her over to Europe. But we went and visited. We spent like 10 days in Ireland driving around this 2,000, I think. At that time, they mentioned 2,000 megaliths sites just in Ireland alone. Dugrange and Altdorf. We drove all over the place. We didn't go to Northern Ireland, no. We didn't have time. But we went to Ireland and we saw wedge tombs. Some had the roofs remade, just like here. Some have been, some of the stones have been repurposed in more modern times for other things, which is kind of sad the way they take them apart and use the material over again. Others were still intact, and most of the ones I saw, they all face southwest, had stones on one side of it. If you look to the right side, you can see some big slabs of stone.
Yep.
The ones in Spain, I've been to Spain, but I haven't seen those in Spain, but I had some 3D images of them, and they look just like that, including there's a basin that you can't see in this picture. It's kind of to the front out of the frame. There's a big basin in the bedrock that goes to an underground drain. The one in Spain had a basin like that. And if you see the white paint on that roof slab to the right, there's actually a little notch there. We put the paint there so you can see the notch. A lot of the big slabs have that. But the one in Spain had one in the notch in the same spot, but it was probably 3 times bigger. And the basin on the left side, which again you can't see in this picture, was about maybe 1/4 the size. And then again on the right side, I think, of the one in Spain, it had slabs. the thinking is in Ireland too that those slabs may have been used to put in front of the chamber, because the ones over there were, I believe, found to be burials, and they'd have skeletal remains. But in New England, the bones will be completely gone in a few hundred years due to the acidity in the soil. They do find bones sometimes a few thousand years old, but it's because they're in peat, clay, or something else to preserve them.
Right.
We're not like Egypt, and we're not like the chalky limestone over in England or in Ireland. I think that preserves them, I think, somewhat too. Although it's been a while since I've been there.
The bogs and the throughout the English countryside, they usually find individuals that died and are in the bogs, and they're almost leather, in characteristic. But
the fur bog people. Yeah, the fur bog. Yeah.
I mean,
we don't have that. Well, we have some bogs here too. Maybe that's probably a good place to look. If you.
Yeah, there are a lot from the Netherlands.
Netherlands too.
Yeah.
But
I mean,
that would be a tomb over there. If that was over on the other side of the ocean. That structure.
It would be a tomb, and the things you would find there. I mean, like. That's the whole thing. It's with the LiDAR and the ground penetrating radar, we see this huge site above ground, stones being moved around. I mean, hefty size stones. These are not light at all.
Yeah, they're multi-ton. It's about 163 pounds per cubic foot for this granite, and so you can just do the dimensions and you come up with the weight of it using that. And you're looking at a bedrock. The whole hilltop is that bedrock granite, So,
Dennison, your guidebook from your gift shop. You.
Yep.
Oh yeah. That's a 1996 book by Joanne Lambert, right? It's a very well-written book. Excellent. We had to put out a new one more recently with all the updates. My daughter-in-law and I did a new one, but that came out in 96, almost 30 years ago.
And Joanne has I'm not going to say who's screwing up the pixelation, but I was accused that you're a slob. Hide all that garbage stacked on top
what?
of the,
I got yelled at on a different show because if I take off this graphic that goes behind me, you see the mess behind me, and it's my office, and everybody's like, just put it in Dad's office. That's what it becomes. But like a messy office just shows that you're, I don't have time for that stuff. I'm thinking about 10 other things.
I'm busy. I'll get to it, but so
I'm gonna get you a green screen, Mark. Just put something up.
Yeah. I've had to tell, and then the fossilized fish head. Can't do that. It makes it look like a vampire is attacking me.
It's fine.
That's another show, though.
Yeah. But I don't want to.
Different show, Mark.
Your own show.
My female radio partner, but I don't want to say who it is. But anyhow, you do have a little chat, or Joanne has a little chapter on the ground penetrating radar, and there does seem to be a hidden chamber up on top of the hill where it echoes if you stomp your foot on. What's the deal there? Have you found like a
well, that radar used back, that was in the 90s, and of course they've improved the software and the hardware.
Right.
And this woman Doria from Massachusetts, Tom's friend, she's a geophysicist, and she does work all over the Northeast, including New York City. She was just out in Denver doing some stuff too. But so 2020 she was in for the first time, and Tom was too. And she did look at that area, Mark, because in the 90s they ran the radar over, and they said there's a cavity here. It's all, the whole hilltop is bedrock. So we're a little surprised because you can see bedrock outcroppings even in that immediate area. But when you stomp on the ground there, it sounds hollow, like Mark said, So
it does.
And I think you were up there doing it too. And so Doria ran her equipment over it in 2020, and she said it is interesting. She's seen something like that before, but it's something that we should do a shovel test pit to take a peek at it. You know, they do it. We've done them all over the hilltop, probably about 90 of these, what we call STPs, 50 centimeter by 50 centimeter. If they discover something, they'll stop, they'll lay it on grid work of strings, you know, and they'll break it into 4 quadrants, and that's what we'll do. But yeah, she discovered something that looked interesting. She said it didn't look as big as a cavity that the radar saw back in the 90s from what she could tell, but there's definitely something we should look at there. So we'll have to get back and take a look. It's just one of the many things we have on our bucket list to do there. One other thing with LiDAR too is not only mapping things, but a standard unit of measure, which I know Mark kind of get into, and that megalithic yard is something you used in Europe. It's 2.72 feet approximately, or 32.64 inches. And Dr. Alexander Thom of Scotland, he was an engineer both at Glasgow and at the University of Oxford. And in the 30s, he got kind of interested in all these megaliths around him. He was sailing one day. As he sailed into his hobby, he was looking at one of the stone complexes, and he said, wow, the thing seems to be organized and also orientated. Maybe there's an alignment with something, you know? And he got into the astronomy and everything. And then he started finding out with this very, very careful survey work he did, and with his son, Dr. Archibald Thom, they both worked on that for decades, and they came up with that standard unit of measure. And back in the 70s, I made a diorama, about 40 acres of the site. I did it in college. It's 1 inch equals 20 feet. And we did the main site, the astronomical alignments, and a little bit of the land outside of that. And we went back and measured some things on the site just so we could make the model even more accurate. We had all these maps that were created over the years, even before I started that project. And the survey work on the astronomy began in 73 by Charlie Pearson of Beverly Pearson and Associates. And they did survey work right up to 77 when I made the model. And so they had in the main site, and they went out and did the 16 acres or so with the astronomical alignments. So I made my diorama, and what we kind of found is we were already aware of the megalithic yard, and it seemed like it seemed to work on our site, but it's preliminary. I was still in college. I was still building all my flying time, getting all my ratings and licenses. So we're very busy. So we really didn't get too much into it until more recently. Again, we got into it, and we've measured some things. My son's an engineer. He's been an engineer at a couple of different companies now. He's been a Raytheon for a few years, and he helped me go up and measure it, some of the different features. But back in the 1930s again, that gentleman, Roscoe Whitney, the engineer from MIT, he said also, he goes, hey, I measured the height, width, and the depth of these structures, and whoever built the site either didn't give a damn or know about linear measurements. He goes, it doesn't seem to be imperial measurements of inches, feet, yards, rods. It doesn't seem to be metric or anything like that. He was at loss as to, because when you build a car, you build a cell phone, you build your house, whatever you build, you use some sort of measuring stick. And he didn't know about the megalithic yard because Thom didn't really put out the first information on that. I'm going to say in the 50s, although a book in 1967 really went into the megalithic yard. And the base of that balance stone in North Hill, New York, Sal Treno back in 78 I had forgotten that he had actually measured where the stones were, and the best idea is that it's based on the megalithic yard too. And the megalithic yard can be cut into, actually half of it's called a fathom. 2.5 megalithic yards is a rod. 1/100th of that is a megalithic inch. So there are increments too. And you can divide the megalithic rod into quarters, halves, 3/4, but you can never divide it into thirds. And when I measured the table, as Mark knows, both the groove and the table, before I had seen that particular, because I either forgot that or, I just read it again after many years of not reading it. We found that the bottom of the groove is 1.5 megalithic yards. The length of it's 2. The top of it's 1.25, so it forms a trapezoid. And then the outside of the table is 2.5 megalithic yards, and it's bell-shaped. So at the top, it comes out to 2 megalithic yards. And the height, although the ground there is uneven, to be fair. But if you go to the front left leg, it's 1 megalithic yard above the bedrock. So more work has to be done on it. The oracle chamber seems to fit. After you have so many coincidences, with these things working, maybe it's not a coincidence. Somebody says, well, it just happens to coincidentally fit a megalithic yard or whatever. But if you keep finding that over and over again, I think the LiDAR is going to help that, narrow it down to say, this is not a coincidence. You got something repeating here. If you don't have inches, you don't have feet, you don't have rods, metric, or whatever. So I think the standard unit measure may be another really key part of proving that this is not built by some crazy, he was really a shoemaker, but they call him a farmer still, Mr. Patty, and his 6 husky daughters, although he only had 6 husky sons, actually. He had 9 daughters that lived. I think he had 2 that died, and he had 2 sons. One son died at the age of 3 days short of 18. He was in Boston doing something, and he died in Boston, 3 days short of his 18th birthday. So he didn't really have 6 husky sons, and he was not a farmer. He was a shoemaker, 5 generations of shoemakers.
Yeah.
So, a lot of facts they throw out there. A lot of things people throw out there, mostly opinions, and then they take it as fact when it's really not fact. It's opinion, it's
Right.
we try to stick with facts, data, and evidence,
One of the things, I mean, I've been talking to a couple of developers to try to develop a program, for paranormal based stuff. And I want to put on people, not the standard usual suspects, but I want to investigate certain areas, and your property was on it. I love promoting people. I love promoting their business, their property. I get yelled at by so many people, like, you give too much, Brian. And it's just like, you don't understand. This is an important thing. You should be, first of all, get out of your house, folks. Tell your kids to put this junk down, right? Get out. My kids had a great time during COVID, and we're going to go into some more photos of it. I'm just going to show you during COVID, when everybody was locked up, everybody was getting fattened up on different things. What happened for me was, it was boring. So we didn't want to, go crazy or just sit there and do nothing. We wanted to, open things up a little bit better. And we went on a trip. So we went to this place called Ninda Mountain. And in Ninda Mountain, I'm gonna take this off for just 1 second, only because I'll explain it. Ninda Mountain has stone chambers on it. I've had Bigfoot encounters up there. I've seen what look like UFOs up there. We when you walk up the mountain all the way up to the top, there's a fire tower. We got out. Okay, get out of your house. Take a road trip. You don't need to fly. The prices are off the chart. Go call up America's Stonehenge and say, where are there good places to stay nearby? I'm sure they have a list of places that will, complement them, as well as vice versa. There's shopping, ladies. There's a lot of outlets.
There's tax-free shopping. It's tax-free shopping too in New Hampshire. We got a huge mall in Salem. It's a gigantic mall, 170 stores, and it's one of the few malls that is doing very well. So plenty of shopping.
One state my dad used to love going to for the liquor stores, but
and we have those too.
Yes, at great prices. So
right on the highway too. They are good.
Right off the highway, actually.
Yeah, you're right there. Very convenient. Yeah.
If you think the stones that my father collected were bad, my mother was like the liquor. But what's really interesting is all the old stuff that he did have. It's worth a fortune now because people want to buy the old stuff. Whatever it is. But so we go up to Ninda Mountain now. When I was introduced to Ninda Mountain, we were doing our own stone chamber investigation locally in New York State. And what really infuriates me is when you look at them, we mentioned Balance Rock, which is this megalithic rock on top of these other stones like a dolmen to a certain degree. They don't know, did it land there from the glacier? Who knows? Whoever put it there, pretty strong people or smart enough to know physics and know how to do, balancing and what have you. So, but when we went into one of these stone chambers, we went in the back and we started doing a little bit of work. We're doing EVP work. So yeah, that's where you take a recorder, you keep it open and you see if you get any sounds. We mentioned everybody. Are you Irish? Are you English? Are you French? Are you Nordic? Are you from Peru? And once we hit the word Phoenician, we got like what sounded like drums, and we was like, it was off the chart. It was great. On top of that, I took one of my friends who I was born and raised in New York with, in the Bronx, who's a big time psychic trans medium, whatever. I took him up there. He did his own little trip throughout the old neighborhood, and I took him up to Ninda Mountain, and he did a session there. He channels things, and I'm very skeptical of channels because I can sit there, close my eyes, roll them in the back of my head, and I can make sounds too out of my mouth. But when he was doing that, we were doing this whole thing in the chamber. I had my own remote view. I don't know if you know much about it, Dennis.
I've heard about it. Sure, yeah. Okay. Military's used it too. I think CIA and stuff. Yeah,
right.
Supposedly.
But I believe it's a gift that everybody. God has given gift. When God made man in His image, He gives him these gifts so you can connect to God, the Father, the Source, if you're in the belief system. So I'm sitting there and I'm getting all this stuff, and just as I'm getting an image of a spiral galaxy, and Riz is channeling I forgot the name of it. And he's talking about life is a spiral. And I'm like, okay, this is way too weird, so, but back to my COVID story. We go up there, we're walking up the mountain, and my youngest is a ham, so I would say to her, hey, pose. And like I told Dennis, I take 3 photos in a row. Boom, boom, boom. It's a paranormal thing because you want to know if something moves. If you take 3 or bursts, you'll see the difference in the image. Like, oh, something is moving in there. Is it dust? Is it something else? Well, this is the image that I got. And I'm like, okay, what the heck is that on her hand?
Looks like it's glowing almost too. Kind of glowing.
Yeah, let me add it back to the stage.
Yeah.
I'm trying to present another one. So I said, I have to zoom in on it. So I literally zoomed in on it, and that was there. And I'm looking at him like, need to get a little bit further into it. So I go get as close as I can get to it without distorting it. And I will tell you there is weight to this image. It looks like if Jiminy Cricket visited Indian Point nuclear power plant and came out. I've never in my life seen it. And the only thing I can think of is that it's a fairy. Now, when you were talking about the fairy or the spirit windows in these structures, this always comes to mind for me. The fact that you get these images, and I'll send them to you. I can send them to you. You can blow them up as well, Dennis, so you can see them as well.
Yeah. That's great. Yeah.
It's important because who's to say there aren't spirits? And who are they calling in? And what's, because different cultures, we're already hearing about, and I mentioned this last night in the show, we're hearing about Egypt and all the stuff underneath the pyramids. Guess what? I've known about that a long time ago. It's been a talk throughout academics and other people. The Egyptians, and I'm going to say it and they get mad at me all they want, they didn't build anything. They happened upon something that was created. And there is rumor that there may be a connection to the Atlanteans who were far superior down the line. What's to say that some of these individuals and Atlanteans or whatever did not come up, you're not that far away from the water in Salem. You really aren't, if in a grand scale of things of a large craft. Who knows what visited that area and maybe helped to instruct the inhabitants, you needed to build it this way for whatever their reason is.
The river courses changed too.
Yes. The river course did change.
Dennis, you want to talk about that a little bit, please?
Well, one of the biggest rivers in our area is the Merrimack River. It runs 110 miles just south of Lake Winnipesaukee. 2 rivers come together, Pembasquat. I always and the other one is the Winnipesaukee. They both converge to create the Merrimack. And it goes several miles south of where we are, but a tributary of it comes right up. It's called the Spigot River. It comes right up on the west side of our property. And it's at the bottom of what we call we used to call it the Native American or Indian Cliff. It's where we have pottery that dates around 2,000 to 2,500 years old. It's Middle Woodland period pottery. So back in those days, you would have been there probably for the summer months, keeping cool under the cliff shelter. And they would have looked down, they would have seen the valley, they would have seen the river, which could be used for transportation, for hunting. Animals go down there. And just beyond that is the Pawtucket Native American Trail. And to the east of us is the Pentucket Trail. And there are two tribes that are part of the Pennacook. So there's a lot of Native American stuff going on. But yeah, we've done a lot of research on what did the Merrimack River look like. It has changed its course. It actually it ends up in Amesbury, between Amesbury and Newburyport, Massachusetts, where it empties into the ocean. And it's navigable up about 15 miles when you start to get to, falls and that kind of thing, makes it so you can't take a boat much further than that. However, it used to empty into Boston. It actually go down, and that's where the Essex Canal was made back in the 1800s. They used that river bottom. For some reason, it went east. It used to go southeast towards Boston. But we've had different researchers, including a professor from Harvard, look at the water levels. Morris Payne was his name. He was very, very, about 30 years ago, he got involved with the site. He's passed away since. But water levels, and it was like our hill was actually part of an island at one time. And that's due to the glacial period. We're going back, after the glaciers around 10 to 12,000 years ago in this area where they were receding away from us. But there are actually some very big lakes, like Lake Bethune is where Salem, New Hampshire was. It went from Massachusetts right into our area. Eventually, the natural dam broke, and now we have that big flat land where Salem, our town, is built. Then the Merrimack River had a natural dam created by all the waters that were rushing as the ice melted. And that was called Lake, I think that was called, Lake Hitchcock, I believe. Lake Champlain was actually Lake Hitchcock is the one that's on the Connecticut River. I take that back. There was another one that was on Merrimack River. It had its own name. I'm trying to think of it. But there were these gigantic lakes. And then as we move more towards the time period of our site, maybe 4,000 years or maybe older, the water levels are still higher from what we can tell. We need to do more research on that. So if you came in from the ocean as a seafaring nation, you could go right up to south of our site. And what we're trying to find is how far they could go north, say 4,000 years ago, because the water levels have changed. The ground is still rebounding here from the weight of the ice. It's been over about 12,000 years, but the ice above us was between a half a mile and a mile, and that pushed the land down here. Because the ocean levels changed about 400 feet since the last glacial maximum around, I think it's 19,000 to 20,000 years ago. The ocean was much lower because it was all locked up in a lot of the ice, Right. So both the ocean has changed its level. The land has, like you take your hand off a sponge, except it takes thousands of years for this. And we have earthquakes. In fact, I know Mark had some recently for a different reason. And we had them here, I guess a month ago. We had a 2.5. It wasn't that big, but we've had some that were 4. But northeastern Massachusetts is rebounding, I guess, quite a bit. The land is still coming up. It's not like the San Andreas Fault, which we've seen out in the California area or whatever. This is a different, I guess, geology. And just because the land is still rising and it still creates little earth tremors, which is really an earthquake. And we've even had Dr. Ebel from the Western Observatory in Mass. And every time there's an earthquake in New England, he gets on the local Boston stations and talk. He's been to our site because our archaeologist, Pat Hume, was with us for 32 years. She was the president of the New Hampshire Archaeological Society. Her husband was actually a doctor of geology at Tufts University, and all the geologists seemed to know everybody. And so she knew Dr. Ebel, and she had him come up and visit our site and look at the geology of it, because the whole hilltop on our site is actually like a fault line that goes through the entire thing. They call it a joint or a fault. The whole hill is split right in half. And the ancient people used that crack to move some of the big slabs. One side was already cut by nature, the whole split, and they lifted the rocks up, made a beautiful face on one side. The other sides, of course, they would have to shape using a method called percussion flaking if they wanted to reshape it or dress it. So the other thing is even Peru, Machu Picchu in Peru is sitting on a fault line, and they said the ancients took advantage of that crack so they could help move, quarry stones. And there's about 800 stone circles built by ancient man in the Neolithic going into the Bronze Age in Wales, going into England. The same thing in Scotland too. But the ones in Wales and England are sitting on top or within a mile or mile and a half of a fault line too. It seems to be something about these fault lines. And I suppose statistically you could say it's just all a big coincidence, but the fact is they do, So,
Right.
yeah, the water levels have changed in our area, so we're quite interested. What did the Spigot River look like? What did the Merrimack River look like? If you go back thousands of years ago, So, yeah, we got to do more research on that for sure.
It's interesting because there's a lot of talk that it's not only just a fault line, but New England may have a super volcano underneath it.
Oh, great!
And
I wasn't aware of that.
I will tell you that I've warned people about it. I'm going back there too, and I'm not thrilled about it because I have, but there may be a significant earthquake in New York City this summer.
Wow.
And I'm thinking significant, which could work to my advantage as long as no one gets killed. I'll take the insurance money instead of fixing up my apartment.
Well, you do have the gneiss rocks being found.
Gneiss rocks.
You mean gneiss? You mean the type of granite it is? Yeah, we have granite. Yeah, it's granite and schist.
Yeah.
They call it bastard granite. They call it gneiss or gneiss. There's different ways. I heard it pronounced differently too, so I'm not sure. Should probably Google the word. But also we have the schist too, and that's the form before it becomes granite, so it's kind of brittle, and we have that too. But the ancients actually quarried the bedrock, and it's foliated. It does come up in layers like peeling back an onion, if you will. And they took advantage of that, and also the earthquake fault line, or the joint. I guess that's more properly. It goes right across the entire hill to the glacial cliff shelter, and it just keeps on going, I guess. But anyway, they took advantage of all that. And Dr. David Stewart Smith, he came to us in 1978. He had been in Scotland, actually, in what is today called English Heritage. He was over there working for that. I think it was the Ancient Monuments group or whatever, before it became English Heritage. And he became a stonemason. He also worked on medieval and megalithic sites up in Scotland. And after all that experience he gained over there, he was into music too. He came back to Connecticut, where he was from, and he discovered we had stone structures in the Northeast. So it was quite a surprise for him in 1978. And he got a doctorate in historical anthropology. He got a doctorate in theology. And he also was he got certified in archaeology by Dr. Bradstreet up in Maine. He was, I think, the state archaeologist. So Dave was a real asset. And he, by 1989, almost 10, or about 11 years after he came back and became our director of research at our museum, he actually went out and he counted the stones in that about a 15-acre area with the astronomical alignments and everything in the site. It is 300 slabs of stone that these ancient people had to quarry off the bedrock to create stones of various sizes used for roof slabs, wall slabs, standing stones. Stones are called orthostats. These are big slabs stood on their axis, so the longitudinal axis is parallel to the bedrock. And these are stood up like, some have roofs on top too, but these orthostats are in Europe too. So all of those stones, what Dave didn't have time to do is do the other 90 acres because there's walls and there's more flat stones. Farmers generally, starting in around 1750 to about 1850 is a classical time period. There were some built before that, obviously, stone walls, and after that, but that was the big stone wall building in New England, basically, and they would take the field stones out of their fields. They didn't want to hit them with a plow, and they're kind of in a way for animals grazing, but they would take them out, and they started building stone walls. Before that, they built mostly wooden fences, I guess. And they started building these walls, and they would put them on their property line. They would use them for stock fences. And so these walls go about 240,000 miles all over New England, one of the highest number of walls in a given area, the size area of New England, anywhere in the world. Ireland actually has about the same number. I've been to Ireland, but they have a different flavor. They're fairly linear, straight, with some exceptions. They're usually fairly, the height is generally the same above the ground. It can vary with the ground. But when you look at our walls, they meander all over. They turn, they twist, they bend. There's all these walls in a given area that you would never use on a farm like that. And then they have
Right.
all those flat stones, monoliths, and the orthostats, and then all stacked up horizontally. And then we have 36 windows in these stone walls too, and then the serpentine walls. So there's a whole different flavor to the walls at our site, and down in the New York area you spoke of, Connecticut, and elsewhere too. They just don't look
Stone
like the
walls
farmers'
everywhere.
walls. Everywhere. Yeah.
You
Yeah.
know, my mother was a school teacher, so she had July and August off. So she became the head counselor for summer camp in Western portion of Connecticut. I was born and raised in Western Connecticut for the most part. I'm a
Okay.
July 4th baby, but I was brought up like 3 days later. I've been up there, and I've always noticed, because we used to explore the woods, there are these stone walls that just keep like it's always the same thing. Like, why do we switch the time clock? Oh, it's for the farmers. No, farmers don't need they don't even need a watch. They know exactly what time to
Yeah.
get up, and that's that. And then they said for as far as the stone wall, oh, that was property markers, or just for cow. There's more to that. There's
Yeah, there
no
is.
way.
Yeah.
And I think it's all connected in some grand fashion. Are we ever in our lifetimes going to get the answer for this? I have no idea, but I don't. It's really interesting how, as of late, and a lot of the stuff that people have taken as gospel is now being like, nope, that's not the truth anymore. Nope. And they may, and I'm going to say the powers that be at the time that may not have given you the truth did it to kind of stop being curious, kid. Focus on your schoolwork,
Yeah.
do
Yeah.
whatever. But
Yeah.
like when you see these structures, this is another one of your photos that you sent me. This is inside. I think it's the C one. That looks like a little window back there. Is that the one that has like a gap behind, in the back, like an area for,
The
I don't know,
speaking tube.
Speaking tube,
tube.
yeah. Mark
Ah.
recognizes it. That's good, Mark.
Speaking
Yeah, that's the oracle chamber. That's about midway through the oracle chamber. It runs north and south about 27 feet, and then it has an east branch that runs down about 18 feet, kind of shaped like the letter Y. That's what Goodwin thought back in the 1930s. He kind of called it the Y
Right.
cabin back then. Take the roof off, and that's how it would look. It's one of the more sophisticated structures on the site. And when you look through that window, you'll be looking through, actually, the other side of that is just below the sacrificial table. So the table is this end of the table is about 6 feet from where that window starts. That's a 6-foot, kind of a rectangular tube. The other side of it actually widens out, almost like a flared, like a clarinet, trumpet, trombone, or whatever, acoustical.
It comes out
Acoustically.
underneath the
Acoustical.
The speaking tube comes out under the sacrificial table here.
It does, yeah.
Right.
And if you yell for that, the voice sounds like it's coming out under the table, just like Mark said, is its location. It does sound like the table's talking to you. And below that, what you can't see in the frame, below where I think it says C, is the bedrock floor. And the bedrock floor, they quarried part of it, used that building material for the walls. They were very, very crafty, very efficient. They didn't waste anything. But what they left there was part of the bedrock as a step. So anybody around 5 feet, even up to 6 feet, will comfortably speak into that hole. And when Mr. Goodwin was there in the 1930s, that had a plug of stone. You didn't even know that speaking tube was there. On the other side, under the table, there was a plug of stone too. It was all plugged up.
They hid it. It was hidden.
They hid it. It was hid. And it was a young man named Paul, and I think this was in 37. He was in there exploring, working for Goodwin, and he moved the rock. It seemed to be something that was loose kind of, but he couldn't quite get it out of there. He couldn't get your hands on it to pull it. He went back to a wooden bunkhouse that used to be there out by the Matt Gate. The bunkhouse still exists. It's in a neighbor's yard today, but he went in there, got a knife. He got in there, and he was able to take a kitchen knife and kind of get it in there to wedge that stone out. And he sees what looks like a big, long, tiny closet. It's kind of long, but not that big, about 6 feet long. He said, "Well, that's interesting." And it was a surprise to Mr. Goodwin and the whole team he had there. I'm sure everybody's like, "Wow, that's really weird. Why did they do that?"
It is interesting.
It was a treasure, where's the treasure in there, And it was just hollow, so unfortunately no treasure. But the next year, as they dug around the table, they thought that table, it's about roughly almost 6 feet wide, again, bell-shaped, and about 9 feet in length. It weighs about 4.5 tons, 9,000 pounds of stone. and thought it was sitting on the dirt because that's what had built up around it over the eons. And when they dug down, they thought it was sitting on 4 legs. One leg was damaged, so they had to do a repair on it. But they were surprised that this thing is sitting on 4 legs, and the legs are sitting on bedrock. And they got underneath the table, still cleaning it, and noticed what looked like another kind of a square plug, because usually the walls are built like 1 stone over 2, like they do bricks, and this was just sitting in there. You could see it. They pulled it out, and here we got a whole tube through there, and it was a surprise to them. And unfortunately, those 2 plugs are no longer with us. They could be on the property. We haven't recognized them. But the 2 underground drains in there, there's 2 underground man-made drains. One's 45 feet, and the other one, we don't know how long it is. But they also had stone plugs blocking them. It's like this structure was winterized almost, like a camp when you leave it for the winter, Yeah,
you open up the faucets and you kind of let the air go through so you don't have any problems with it.
So they did something like that, and they put the shutters up. But there's a chimney flue in there too. It has, and I think you're looking the opposite this picture. That's looking true south. That's looking towards the entrance. But behind you is where the hole in the ceiling is, and that was also a surprise to Goodwin because they didn't know that existed until they looked at it more closely. And what it had is 2 stone shutters that could be actually turned to adjust the draft. But on top of that, there was a stone that actually slid in this rectangular kind of square shaped, arrangement of stone.
Chimney? Like a chimney?
Yeah, like a chimney. And then they would move the stone over it to conceal not only the 2 louvers, but the entire thing would be concealed. So Mr. Goodwin decided to build a fire before they discovered the chimney, just to see. His idea is this was an Irish Colby monk monastery after he decided it was not a Viking settlement. The Vikings used sod houses. This is nothing like that. Right. I've been up to Alonzo Meadow. We were Iceland a couple of years ago, and went up to Iceland, saw a lot of the Viking, really got immersed in the Viking stuff. And, this is not Viking at all. So we thought the Irish called him monks who were probably escaping Viking persecution. So he saw this as the monk's chamber, if you will, or they had another name for it, but he thought this might be where the priest stayed all the time. We don't think it's a living site. We think it's a ceremonial site. But anyway, he built a fire in there to see if he could warm it up and make it somewhat comfortable in there, and they did. And it was on a cool day. But the problem is they didn't know the chimney was there. And the whole thing, they were coughing their heads off and gagging, the thing filled with smoke. Now, later on, when they did find the chimney flue, they tried it again, and they were able to build a fire right below it, and it drafted beautifully, and it warmed it up in 15 minutes, I guess. So a priest or shaman could actually stay in this because there's an 8-foot bed below below that speaking tube. There's actually a bed. It goes in about 8 feet. Well, we don't know if it's a bed, but it certainly would. You can't sit up in it. You could go in there and lay in it like I've done before, but it's about 8 feet long in total, and it has a little window. So if you're laying there, you could actually look into the chamber and see if anybody else, I guess, was in it if you wanted to. It has 5 closets in that structure. It has 2 carvings, and it has the 2 underground drains. It has a bench seat that could hold like 3 people, all carved out of rock. There's no metal tool markings on it whatsoever. And the biggest stone on the site, I think, is to the left of this picture. I'm trying to see. It's a little hard to see it on my phone here, but it's actually no, not your fault at all. But I think that stone is it. It was actually part of a gigantic boulder. It got split, and it looks like they moved the 2 boulders apart. The lighter part is about, they estimate 50 tons. I don't know how accurate that is. Again, it's 163 pounds per cubic foot. You can't see the whole thing, so maybe you can't get a precise, weight on it, I guess. But they actually moved it apart, and you can see the shape of that part of it. And you look at the other side, and it has that beautiful bench seat, all carved 90 degrees. And I think, Mark, you probably saw that, and it's opposite to one of the closets. Mm-hmm. I think, did you catch that, Mark, when you were there visiting?
Yeah, we went all through that. Yeah, I remember that.
It's just you just like, and one of them's 50 tons, and then the other one is a 47. It's like it's so nonchalant coming in there, but if people actually have to grok it, 50 tons is a lot of weight.
Yeah.
1 ton is a lot of weight.
It's a lot of effort. Yeah.
And besides that being on the floor, you have the really heavy slabs on the roof above it as well.
Yeah,
That's a good point, Mark. Yeah, that's a good. Well,
yeah,
actually, in 2020, we actually I had to go up with a T probe because they wanted to do the group near New England Antiquities Research Association. My dad started the group in '64, but they're still going strong. They had their last meeting in Fishkill, New York, about a month
huh,
ago. But they have meetings all over New England. The one before that in the fall was their 60th anniversary, so they held it in Manchester, New Hampshire. But the field trip was to our site, and then they did a couple local sites too. But they got a hold of me and said we'd like to talk to you about maybe doing optically stimulated luminescence testing in the site. And we're always open to that, you know. And they had a fund, and they're going to cover some of it, and that was great. So they said you got to pick out a couple places where we can do the test. So they gave me some of the information regarding what would be required, and one was a certain depth of soil. So
right,
I went up on the top of the oracle chamber, and I had my dad's T probe, which is a T handle steel thing. And I said, well, okay, I'll go up there and I'll check the roof because I think the oracle chamber roof would be a great place. I don't know of anybody ever excavating that before. Other parts of the chamber, yes, including the
right,
drain and other things. So I went up there and I found that the roof was just a couple inches of soil. It was between we had 17 inches up to 24 inches of soil, and they said that'd be fantastic if it's not been disturbed. So that was one choice, and then the watch house was another choice, you know. And it's $1,000 per sample. It takes about 2 years to get the results back. And we had Dr. Feathers from the University of Washington. He was the lead, and we had like 25 people on the team. They were there all day. On 9/11, 2020, they all came in. So that core on top of the roof, the results we got back in 2022, it's a light test. It tells you when the either rock sample or dirt, in this case it was dirt or sediment, saw the light of day last. And that turned out that in 1550 AD is the last time that soil where they got the core had seen the light of
wow,
day. So that's before the Patty family came over from England to Virginia originally in 1670, I think it is 1669 or 70. But it's also pre-colonial in this area. You know, that's a pre-colonial date. Dr. Feathers says, well, the chamber obviously was there before that date, and then that soil, which could have taken many years to build up. So the chamber could have been sitting there for eons before that particular soil was there. The other sample that tested was down in front of the watch house. It was the end of that 2,550-foot serpent wall. That's our best understanding of it right now. There's one of
right,
these, the wall undulates. Not all the serpent walls undulate. Some have just kind of it can be a sloped back. It could be a flat back, you know, or a body.
right,
Sometimes they S-turn. Sometimes they do undulate vertically. And that one undulates a number of times at 2,550 foot. When as soon as it leaves its head, it does three beautiful humps. Then it goes up around. It touches every astronomical alignment. It's the back. See now, it's the back sight. You have a foresight and a back sight with an alignment like a gun sight. Every
right,
monolith, and I think you saw some photographs of some of the monoliths, that is part of the body of that 2,550-foot serpent. Comes back, it does another beautiful hump, and then it turns 90 degrees to a pointed tail. Well, right in that hump, they got a sample there, and that showed that dirt hadn't seen the light since 1400 AD. That's before Columbus. And again, the wall could have been sitting there for many, many eons before that. So OSL is kind of something fairly new. I think Oxford University got in it in the 80s, and it's a geological testing. So the USGS in Denver does it. Brookhaven National Laboratory, two physicists came up to join Dr. Feathers, and they're actually physicists, and he's a doctor of archaeology, and they do crossover in their work, you
right.
know. And so that's pretty cool. So we're doing OSL testing on the site. We have 16 carbon datings we've done since 1967. And the oldest one on the main site was 4,000 years old. And the second two were 3,000 years old. We've got two 3,000-year-old dates in the main site, a 4,000-year-old date, and we got a couple other dates in the main site also. But so the site could be as early as 4,000 years. These other dates should support that, saying it's pre-colonial and prehistoric, you know.
Yeah,
Right.
Dennis, could you tell us a little bit about the date from 5,000 BC and then the date of the charcoal by in Joanne's book with the charcoal from nearly 2,000 BC? What's the difference in the 3,000 years between the weekend camp out,
Oh,
and it,
hmm.
you
Was
know,
that was that the 7,400-year-old date, Mark? Trying to remember. We had
yeah,
16 of
that
them. So
yeah, that was the 5,000-year-old one, w- with the rock as a way to reflect the heat, and then
oh, okay.
and then you have the charcoal from nearly 2000 BC. So what does that tell us about when um possibly transatlantic uh, uh crossings were made, and the
Right.
ceremonial center was established on your hillside or hilltop?
Well, I mean, that's a good question. The oldest carbon dating on the hilltop was done back in the 1990s by, in fact, that lady, Pat Hume, the archaeologist, was doing shovel test pits, along with another assistant, and I would help out, and other members would help out. Some of her members from the Hampshire Archaeological Society would come down and help her too, while she was president of that. But the oldest one was actually 7,400 years old, and that's probably the one Mark's referring to.
Wow.
It was located kind of to the south of the North Stone. The North Stone is actually aligned. It's it's a monolith, and it was several feet from there, so it didn't really date the stone or its adjacent wall, which is part of that body of that 2,550-foot serpent. But it did show that they thought this looks like a fire pit. We can't be 100% sure because nature plays tricks sometimes. But a fire pit
Right.
has a certain arrangement of charcoal compared to normally when a fire takes place. Sometimes you see like a horizon of charcoal. The forest burnt down. It's a great marker too because it tells you when you date the charcoal that anything below it's older and anything above it's newer. That's wonderful. But what it showed is human activity on top of the hilltop going back to the Middle Archaic time period, possibly. So that's pretty early in this part of the world. That's pretty early. So the hill was possibly attracting people way back then. But nearby that was a North Stone Mark mentioned. And in '88, we decided to do an excavation the next year in '89 because the stone was slowly leaning as some of these monoliths do. Fortunately, the walls and the monoliths are built on bedrock, so you don't have a lot of frost action. Farmers' walls, generally, they just lay them on top of the soil. And every year you get the frost moving them up, moving them down, causing damage to them. If trees don't fall, people don't push them over. The frost action causes a lot of problems, and every fall, and Robert Frost, the poet, gets into that. You go and you rebuild the wall and you can add to it from the new crop of stones that pop out of your field each fall. But anyway, that stone is going to eventually fall over. It could be decades, it could be hundreds of years, but we were worried that it would fall over. So when they excavated, it was a 3-year project, a very slow project. As they went down, they found the soil next to it undisturbed. They found the layers of soil, the stratified layers with very, very dark, the duff on top, and then you get to a little bit lighter soil. So the layers were unbroken, which means nobody disturbed this for many, many years, And when they got down I forget how far they got down, a foot or so, we have the actual measurement. They found a fire pit. And when they sent the charcoal in for dating, it came back 1,350 years old. And so the thing was that some skeptic would say, well, they put the stone next to the fire pit. It doesn't do anything for the stone. But actually, if you dig a hole, you put the stone in there, and you backfill it, you're going to break all that strata that goes right up against the stone. You're not going to have that. You're going to lose that. And the charcoal will be all mixed in there, and that's not the way it was. The only possible way was that the stone was sitting there for eons, and the soil very slowly builds up. In New England, it's about 1.25 inches every century. That's just an average. It can be more or less than that. And the fire pit was there. So the stone was used as a backstop for the fire. Mark was getting to, maybe somebody was just passing through and built the fire there, and then they moved on after that. But that stone was there, and I think that should have made the headlines because that was a really good piece of evidence that this is
That's great evidence.
Before the Viking period, even before Columbus ever came over by hundreds of years, and it's possible that some of the other monoliths would have something like that too. I mean, we haven't looked at all the monoliths. We haven't. Maybe ground penetration radar might be able to detect another one of these little fire pits, but that was finished in 1991, and then Pat Hume went out and started doing shovel test pits across the hilltop. And her husband was still alive at the time, the doctor of geology, in which he says that the hilltop was probably 75% bare bedrock 4,000 years ago, and maybe a quarter of it was covered with soil and vegetation. So a much more, more open hill. And if you're out there coring some of these slabs and you're moving them, you don't want to move them on soft soil. It's better to move them on bedrock with log rollers, and you don't have trees in your way every 2 feet. Like, that's what the woods was, during the time when I first came. And before me, the hilltop is nothing but trees, So if you're trying to build a site, every foot you got a tree in the way, you got roots, you got trees, stumps, whatever, and you had that soft soil. So you're trying to move a multi-ton stone. You could do it in the wintertime when the ground's frozen, but then you have snow to contend with too,
Right.
So, or mud season in the spring. So, but anyway, I think the hilltop is pretty bare, and then you could look at all the alignments very nicely, and you didn't have the trees in the way to watch a sunrise, sunset, moonrise, moonset. We do have, as I mentioned earlier, about 57 different alignments they were watching, so they would want to see a very clear hilltop. But that 7,400-year-old date was, that we got that over 30 years ago, and that was like, that's pretty cool. And at the same time, we found a wigwam site near the parking lot, and there were
Ooh.
3 charcoal datings from that. It was 30 feet in diameter. All the post molds, all the stains were still there. And I think it was 1,200 years old, 1,600 years old, and just under 2,000 years old. So it looks like some Native Americans must have used that same spot over and over again. Wigwams will only last maybe we're down at the Plymouth Plantation. We had Thanksgiving. We went to the Native American settlement there too. That was so interesting. And they said the average that they're kind of like longhouses, and the wigwam would be very similar to that except round, would last maybe 15 years, maybe a little longer. And what they would do is after a while, they would deplete the soil if they were doing farming. And the Native Americans would actually burn the whole thing down and move to a new area with fresh soil, because they also wanted to get rid of their scent. They wanted to get rid of the human scent, and they would burn everything down there, and that would fertilize the soil. So it was kind of interesting. Maybe 15 years out of a wigwam, and there may have been multiple wigwams built in that same spot, so over almost 1,000-year period,
It's I would expect nothing less from walking through the woods, and you're hunter gatherers, which is what a lot of our indigenous were, and you come across something like, oh, this looks nice. No one's there. I'm like, we're gonna go to that village, and we can seek cover, and we don't need the wigwam as much. And I mean, I see it working, but the dates are just blowing my mind of how old some of the the tests are coming back. And also the cost is blowing my mind too, because it isn't inexpensive.
Well, we did, actually, we got some carbon datings last year that they run about, they're actually, we used the same lab my dad started in 67, and they prepared the sample. It turned out to be human bones, actually, and they were actually DNA'd up in Thunder Bay, Canada at a university. I think it was Lake Point University or Lakefront. I always get the name mixed up, but it's up in Thunder Bay, Canada. And the bones were found 90 years ago by Mr. Goodwin. And they were in the Smithsonian in 1968, and a physical anthropologist looked at them and says, I think they're human, and they're from 3 different parts of the body. And she talked about the texture, she talked about the density, the hardness, and she goes, there's some things about them a little abnormal, but she goes, I think they're human. No DNA back in 1968. It was Dr. Lucine St. Hoyen, a physical anthropologist. She also looked at some bones that came out of the watch house, and she identified them as possibly bison or bison. And she went, She showed them to her male colleague, who was more of a specialist with animals, and he looked at them and goes, I think they're buffalo, bison. And she goes, that's my thought. But they're from New Hampshire. He goes, well, if you go back in time, a long time ago, there were woodland bison in this area. So, we haven't dated those. We probably should, but they're found inside that chamber, And there's also a little bone pendant with a drill hole found right there in that watch house. And that was late 1950s, 58, 59, they found it. And then a stone piece of slate, which Mark may have seen in our, it might be in I think there's pictures in my book, my new book. And also, I don't know what page it is. Mike built it. But anyway, it's also a Joanne's book, maybe. But there's a pendant. It's made out of stone, like a piece of slate, I think. We should identify the material. I actually have an app on my phone. I should do that. It has a drill hole. They were both found together. We think they're pendants. But that little stone pendant is shaped like the summer solstice sunrise. It's just like, it's kind of cool. Could be coincidental, but so bones have been done, and we've been doing, like I say, OSL dating, the DNA, and all of that can get rather pricey, but that sample was done by our laboratory in Massachusetts, but all they did is prepare it, and they sent it to the University of Arizona in Tucson to have mass accelerated spectrometry, because he said it's not enough mass that I can do it here in my laboratory and do normal carbon dating. So we had to do mass accelerated spectrometry. It's 1,000th the mass. He goes, but back in the 60s, we didn't have that. So some of the things that you would have had back then, my dad, Dr. Harold Kruger, couldn't have tested because you don't have enough. Today with mass, you can do it. It's pretty, all the technology is getting pretty cool and good. And that's been around for a few years, that mass accelerated spectrometry. I don't know if it came out in the 70s or 80s, but it runs about $800 or $700 or $800 when you're done with it. I think $700 was the price on that, just for one sample. We only had one carbon dating done, 2 DNA, and we had found 3 human bones. So the other bone stayed with us in the museum for safekeeping. We didn't send that out, So anyway, so we're still doing that kind of thing, testing.
That's why I'm putting this up here. It's America's Stonehenge. Get tickets, go there, and help them pay for some of this testing.
And I think it's expensive. Yeah, and the LiDAR and all that. Some of these guys have been so great with us. Because and Tom Elmore from Nat Geo, he's in Suffield, Connecticut. He's been wonderful. I got him a couple of gigs, like one in Belize, so that's good, And he's doing stuff all over the Northeast. But he's a landscape architect too. I think that's his main line. And then he does LiDAR. And then the other gentleman does LiDAR, pretty much for a living, that we have, Chris Stein from GPI. And that LiDAR is pretty amazing too. So all this stuff is pretty cool. And it definitely helps. Oh, go ahead.
No, it definitely helps because it adds more information to the site. Then it gets more intriguing. More people looking at it brings more, when the production companies come like, hey, we want to film here. I'm like, okay, well, get your checkbook out.
Yeah, exactly. I know you're in the paranormal. I mean, my dad got involved with Hans Holzer. He approached us in the 1970s. Alexandra?
Yeah, she's wonderful. Yeah.
She's been to our site, and she came up for the shooting of the David Schrader's The Holzer Files, 5 years ago, as a matter of fact. Scott Walters came in for that, too. He was there for 3 days, and they both live in Minneapolis, David Schrader and Scott. And I've been on David's show before. I think he's doing another show, I think, now. But he was brought in by Discovery Network. They said, bring in Scott Walters. The show moved over from History Channel to the Travel Channel. So Discovery Network wanted them. So it was a fun time with all those guys. They were there for over a week, And the whole building was set up like a studio. A lot of information. She actually used her dad's camera, and she got an image. I don't know if Mark ever saw that. Maybe you saw that show, Mark, where they showed an image in a silhouette of a person in the Oracle Chamber, and she used her dad's very camera.
I remember seeing that, and I know we have to probably start winding the show down in just a few minutes, but I did want to mention that if people are interested in your next event, big events that's only coming up and like a month from today. When's the summer solstice? It's
going to be. Thank you, Mark.
It's not on my calendar.
So it's on the Friday the 20th if you look at a calendar. But what we're going to do is do it. We're going to do it on the Friday and Saturday this year. We're going to be there for sunrise and sunset. Hopefully, one of the 2 days we'll have good weather. On Friday, we'll have like a drumming circle, and on Saturday, we'll have Katja. She's been coming in for 30 years doing a 3-hour ceremony on the different quarter seasons, quarter days. She does that. So, that's right. Yeah. Oh, is that our calendar?
That's your calendar.
Okay.
Oh, there we.
Yeah,
Oh, okay.
It may have helped if I went to that before the show.
Yeah.
No,
Okay. There
it's
it is.
fine.
Yeah,
I
yeah,
just
But,
yeah.
I'm
but
promoting.
it,
That's what we
it,
do.
Yeah,
well,
thank you for
it,
doing that. Yeah,
My
it just
that's
pleasure.
great. That's great.
it,
Thank
it
you
just
both.
past
Yeah.
this past weekend, you had Maria Wheatley
I'm
as
gonna.
a guest.
Yeah.
Yeah, here's her.
Yep.
She
Oh,
gets into spiritualism and earth energies, and she's pretty well known in the circle. She lives right by Avebury, just north of Stonehenge. And I did her podcast. Going back, I guess, Mark, probably what, 5 or 6 years I've known Maria, and so
probably
she
longer
showed
than
up.
that.
She was here for 2 days, but she came into Boston on a Thursday. Got to see a little Boston with her daughter, and she met up with her friends at our site. And I gave them a couple of VIP tours both days, and then I let them loose to do their research, study, and investigation. And she's going to get back, and I guess it's going to end up on a Richard Hoagland show too. She does a lot with Richard Hoagland, and she travels the world and everything. But her dad was at our site back around 1980, so he was
Right.
there, and it's her first visit with us. And so she's she may be another, if you can get around, she's a very interesting guest, she's definitely, well, as Mark knows, she does a great job with her explanation, but she's certainly more into the earth energies. I think she really looked at the windows. She did a lot in the Oracle Chamber around the table area, and then she did serpent walls. And again, she's the one that told me about the serpent walls in England and also the windows in England, in Dartmoor, that part of England. So,
One of the things that I was asking you before we got the show started was if anybody's used sound frequencies in the area and recorded events that have taken place. And I'm going to bring some stuff up in one of the chambers, which is off of Route 301 in New York State. I'm not going to tell you exactly where. It's a 10 by 10 foot chamber. You would never know it was there, but this is the back wall, and that stone is probably 6.5 feet tall, at least 4 to 5 feet wide. And notice that it's not squared. It's very much like a trapezoid, which is, when you mention that, that's like, oh, that's very interesting. But what's interesting in this photo is that you kind of can make out certain things there. That is actually because of the UV light or infrared we you use. You can only make it out those symbols at that point in that light wave. If you took that off, you put a regular light on it, you would never see that, and it becomes ruins. It's like a C, an H, a B, or the reverse, and a K. And this blew my mind at one point, but something else, I just wanted to share that with you guys. You
that's
kind of
really
can see
cool.
it here.
Yeah.
Um,
Wow.
one of the things that we did, and I'm going to present it right here, is we use sound frequency and vibration, and we use FLIR, and it was a brutal July or June 18th day or something like that. And I'm going to share the screen, and hopefully we can get the audio on it as well. And we went in there, and this is that is the stone chamber. I'm in the stone chamber, and I'm in the back by that wall, that piece. And we start using Tibetan singing bowls. And I'm going to show you this. It's not that long a video, and I want, this is one of the reasons why I'm begging people to actually start utilizing things like sound frequency and vibration. And hopefully video of the stone chamber right now, the sound comes on. That changed it instantaneously. I'm not moving from this spot. I'm going to try to stay in the center of this. So in this, there's a roadway right in front of it. And but this is hidden in the shade. This is a lot more hotter. When we started pulling back, we started using some of the
Look at that, 98 degrees. 80, it's close. I mean, you're within 10.
I said 60, you dope.
I thought it said 80. I'm looking on the side, it looked like 80.
that's me and my buddy arguing over these things.
Sorry, I'm a dope.
I
Mr.
thought you were
Senoriga.
just fucking
All right, who's the
blinder than me.
I'm trying to get to a certain point. These are different fluctuation in temperatures. I just want to see if we're not getting to that. It may be the next one. There's one moment where we have what appears to be a portal that appears around the chamber, and this object peeks its head in for a split second. I think there may be one more. That's just the floor itself. It's a lot cooler than the maybe it's this one. Okay.
That's weird, right there.
Nice cold, kind of purple spot.
Yeah.
You're going to start seeing this purple, the darker purple and
On the
black.
floor or right there?
This big one. Is that hole right there?
I'm assuming it's that hole right
It
there.
opens up and it starts to build around the entrance. And then something peeks in. I think there are only 5 videos on that one. I just don't know where we are. But this is...
Okay, I'm just going to go quickly around. And then there's a temperature gauge on the top.
Where's the temperature?
It says temperature up top. So what I'll do is let me just...
Okay. I'm just going to fast forward it to this point. That's a hand.
It's like a head. Mouth, nose, eyes.
There's someone coming in front of it, but and I was hoping this would be the video, but maybe it isn't. Long story short, as this plays out,
there's a huge... This where I'm pointing right now is a real big hot spot.
it got instantaneously
really hot.
like super cold there.
I wish I
And
brought my thermal.
You can see it start to...
Here.
Yeah, he needs to go get his thermal, but you can see it start
like
to
it's
build around.
Too
almost
far to
like,
get, but
you were talking about before, the serpent eating itself.
it's on the ceiling.
The universe, which I've always thought it wasn't only just about death, but about portals, because you're moving
It's almost
from
as
one
if every
one
time you
form
try to
into another.
go one place, the heat.
And I brought
leaves.
this up in this chamber. It's going to end right now. I'm just going to stop it right now, not to kill myself or get crazy with it. But
that
this
the
is on the
Somewhere
Bronx
Light Show?
Paranormal Society YouTube page, Stone Chambers 301. And we're going to stop sharing it. So I'm going to move it out. The point being, when we look at these, sites like your site too, tone can be, or vibration or frequency, literally through that hole where Mark said it's this, the speaker hole or the, the communication spot. Speaking tube. Maybe, I don't want to get Indiana Jones on anybody, but maybe if they use a certain sound, it caused something else to take place, to vibrate, and something else did something.
Yeah, we should try that. Yeah, we should try that. I know Scott Walters talked about acoustical archaeology.
Yes.
And back when he was filming back in 2012, and I understand Stonehenge has acoustical properties. And then we've been to Malta. We were there in the 90s, Malta, and I know the Hypergeum is also acoustical too. And it's why did they do that underground in this? I guess it was, I don't know, Acropolis or whatever. But why would they do that? And yet they did. And it has a certain acoustical. I'm not sure if it's the same as what you're doing. I know that Maria is into frequencies too. And I've been on some radio shows with her and Richard Holcomb talking a lot about the frequencies. That seems to be a strong thing with her, doing that kind of research, frequencies, but the acoustical. But if you visit us, come on up and we can make sure you can get in there and try to, if you'd like to, try that.
I
That'd
always
be
have
wonderful.
it with me.
Oh, you got it with you. Well, then, yeah, that'd be
Yep, I
perfect.
always have it with me.
Yeah. Yeah.
My
Yeah.
friend that's in there, he's like, his daughter got married. He's like, don't bring anything, don't do anything. And as he's walking his beautiful daughter down the aisle, I whipped out of my pocket a K2 meter, and he just
Oh, that's funny.
you know what? I mean, it's kind of like, there are certain things I just have it's in the car. There's certain things that are readily available, and but
you have to do it.
right, you kind of like, I have like a little FLIR that's portable, not the greatest, but it will serve a purpose, especially in a smaller environment. But with the phone and hooking up to frequencies, I've used a Tibetan singing bowl sound frequency resonance and vibration throughout my experience in the high and strangeness. And this is, America's Stonehenge is just up there on high strangeness, just as like the pyramids, Gobekli, Easter Island, and all that. If you don't think that's strange, like who would carve all these, heads and put them in the middle, like 3,000 miles in the middle of the water? There's got to be a point. Yeah, go ahead, Mark.
I was just gonna say, what Maria argues, or points in her book. She talks about her book, The Secret History of Stonehenge. She talks about the harmonics of Stonehenge.
Very important.
And, let's see, harmonics would have intensified the power of the therapeutic dynamics, which were undoubtedly activated by a combination of sound toning and meditation. So, she's, I think, in one of the shows Maria Dennis and I did, she was talking about Stonehenge is could be seen as basically a hospital.
Well, I've been to Stonehenge. I went there. It was, of course, the day I go, it's the foggiest day in like English history. And there was no guard there. And the only thing stopping you from going to the stones was this little rope.
Yeah,
So
I remember that. Yeah.
I moved to a little area that didn't have, it had the little rope and no one was there. And I went, oop. I didn't travel 3,000 plus miles to sit behind a rope going, I wanted to touch that since I was 6 years old. I'm going to touch it. And I understand why they do it, but I did walk through. There is something about that. I don't think it's somatic or anything like that when you walk in there. In theory, I think Stonehenge had the hospital theory is great, but if you get believers to surround you in a certain area and you hit the right tones and frequency, we already know that sound can levitate. We see it. Psionics. Is it Symantics or I forgot the name of it. But there is also an ability, and they talked about using sound for teleportation. And if
Jeffrey of Monmouth covered that.
Yeah, well, I think it was a portal. I think what they were doing is creating an opening that someone would go through and they would be transported to a different area. Can I prove it? No, I'd have to get a time machine to do it, to go back in time to go, see, I told you they were using it as a portal, which would be great. But if we ever get a chance to do that, I'm going to pick you up, Dennis. We'll pick you up. We'll go back in time and then this week
that'd be perfect.
Building America's Stonehenge and going.
I've been waiting for that for a long, long time.
Yeah.
We're always talking about a time machine. We just need that time machine.
Well,
or
yeah.
I don't know if would remote viewing go back in time. I know I've read about CA. That would be interesting. Yeah.
I mean, if you want, I'm already up for that challenge. I haven't done that. I've actually remote viewed. It's interesting. I was doing it as someone was asking me about the in Russia. I'm not in Russia, in Alaska, the Alaskan Triangle, and I'm like, oh my
Oh yeah.
God. And I did that. There's another area, and the size of the triangle was massive. It was made out of like almost snowflake obsidian, and at certain points it was so thin. The obsidian was ground out so thin, it was like a window. I couldn't even. You can't comprehend how big this was, and we're talking about Manhattan Island big. Okay, that's what I'm talking about. And there's a substructure. I'll have no problems about doing it and seeing
that'd be
what I
great.
can see out of it. I'll send it
Oh,
directly to you.
yeah.
And Mark, you can get a copy of it, and then we can figure it out. But I just think you have a great. You inherited a passion from your father. And I think your kids, even though they went like, I'm going to be an engineer, Dad, but I'm still going to be helping you, map this out. I think everybody has a little bit more of a passion for it, and maybe they understand. It's unfortunate, when people pass on, but I also believe that once you pass on, you get all this like knowledge, like, oh my God, Bigfoot was real.
Yeah, right. Yeah.
Oh, it
It's
was
like
just a shopping center.
it's like my dad when he passed. People go, my dad, after he passed in '09, people go like, well, now he knows, about the site, so he knows the truth,
true.
So
Yeah, he's
that's kind of
enlightened.
cool. Yeah.
But
It's pretty cool. Yeah.
I'd love to, anytime you want to come back, if you want to promote the book, if you want to promote your brand, if you just want to hang out, you're more than welcome to come on the show. I can't thank you enough for being here. I want to thank everybody that's shown up. And we always get a lot more now. These ladies right here at the Blondes and the Booze. Her name's Krista. She's here. And Brandy, they have a show, Blondes and Booze. They're going to want to have you on. I don't know if you were on the Michigan UFO show. They'll have you on. And Rob, who was in here, Bigfoot Michigan, Rob. These people, I was their guest last night, and Rob did something I pulled earlier. I said, hey, let's go get Rob, over the 1,000 mark or whatever it was of subscribers. They did it for me, and they pushed me over a certain mark because I started organically. I didn't pull in from my other sites. And I got to thank them for it. I want to thank this wonderful human being and great author. His name's Mark Eddy. He has a new book. He's authored a book, and he's been hitting the book circuit. But if it wasn't for Mark, I've actually talked to you, Dennis, previously, long time ago, in a different setting. You were on I had a friend named Bill. We were all talking, and you were there, and you invited me up, and I was like, I'm on my way. But it was after I actually, I was up there, and I mentioned I was up there. But it's a pleasure to actually meet you in person. And
that's great. Yeah.
And
but you got to come back now. You got to come back. That's wonderful.
I'm definitely coming back. I don't, I got to be honest. I'd like to take the family up there, but it'd be so much easier not to hear the whining. Like, when are we eating?
It sounds like a summer vacation. But I do have a Bigfoot that came from Charles Hapgood, and Charles Hapgood's a guy that Einstein actually did the forward in his book back in 1956 or what before Einstein. But anyway, my dad got the cast, and it's one that was Sir Edmund Hillary back in 1951.
Very
when
nice.
He went over to with what was the name? What was the guy's name? Mallory. Mike, remember that the mountaineer from England, the famous mountaineer Mallory, or
I think it's Mallory.
Hillary?
Well, Sir Edmund Hillary went with this gentleman, and I'm trying to think of his name. It's not. Anyway, he did go over there in 51 before they climbed Mount Everest. When Hillary climbed, it was the year before that, I think. And they were over there, and they actually saw some. They saw some prints in the snow in that area, right around Tibet or wherever they were. And they photographed it. They went back to London, and from those photographs, they created the cast. And that cast went from Hillary, I guess, eventually to Charles Hapgood, who is at Keene State College. And Charles Hapgood gets on History Channel. He had the Perry Reese maps, the Antarctic, where you could actually all of that. And he was a friend of my dad's, starting in the 60s. And I believe Charles Hapgood died around 1982. He gave a lot of his things to my dad, including that cast. I was at my dad's house probably 30 years ago. And I'm looking at the wall and go, what the devil's that thing? He goes, well, that was given to me by Charlie Hapgood. He got it from Sir Edmund Hillary. So I have that. And another good friend of my dad's was Ivan Sanderson. And he's the guy who came up and coined the term cryptozoology. You know, he's from
Yeah.
Edinburgh, lived in New Jersey, had his own zoo with another gentleman, and he was on the Gary Moore show. He was on the first color TV show back in 1953, but he was on the radio. He's a great radio host too, and you can actually get him on YouTube. But I was on one of my first radio shows I ever did in 1970. We flew down to New York City with our chief archaeologist, James Woodall, who was with us through 1999 when he passed away.
Right.
My dad and I, we flew down to Eastern Airlines and kind of fell in love with aviation because of that, and another trip before that. But we got to go into the WOR, the whole radio facility at night, and we were on a show. It was a Barry Faber show, but Barry Faber was on vacation, so Ivan Sanderson, I guess, was filling in for him. So we get to, and talk. I was a young kid talking all about the same thing we're doing right now. That was 55 years ago, and it was very good memories. So, but Ivan Sanderson was quite the guy. He was really a really fascinating, person too.
It's the whole subject matter is fascinating, and it deserves more attention, and you'll be very surprised to what comes of it, because this very well could change the way we think of things, and for the better in the most part. I remember my father's father sold newspapers to Admiral Perry.
Wow.
Yeah, that's how old
this is. Cool. That's pretty cool.
Yeah, that was pretty cool.
Yeah. Wow.
And then his brother, he was one of 18. They didn't have TV back there, folks. 18 kids total.
Wow.
Over time.
They needed more TV back then. 18 kids.
Well, from what I understand, my father's grandfather was not liked by his wife, because he just come into town and then whatever. But my grandfather's brother, my uncle, he was very, very good friends with Bugsy Siegel and Maya Lansky and Babe Ruth, and he gave my father a ball from Murderer's Row, which is dog hate. As a little kid, I said, "Did you kill the dog?" He said, "No way." But growing up, I was a Red Sox fan, and they couldn't believe it because I'm born and raised in the Bronx.
Right.
And like, how can you be a Red Sox fan? I'm like,
hey, that's funny.
Rice, Don Zimmer, come on. But I appreciate you. Please, everybody, go over to StonehengeUSA.com. You can also America's Stonehenge, and you get there. Go to the events. Go up there for the solstice. And you know what? You get lobster. You get some good drinks. You meet Dennis and the family. You get an alpaca to possibly spit in your face.
Yeah, we got lobster clams. We definitely have that. Seafood is very good up in Maine and New Hampshire.
Oh, yes, sir. Yes.
Yep.
And I wish you the best. And Mark, I can't thank you enough.
Thank you.
We're gonna have Mark as a guest one day too.
Oh, yeah.
Very, very soon, probably in June. Like I said though, next week I'm traveling. I got to drive back to New York. I'm not going to say the name of it. I will be doing a rerun, but it's somebody you've never seen before. So, but it's a great show. So just stick to it. Please come back in, and we're going to have Dennis. If something new happens, please let us know. And anytime you want, you can come in.
Oh, well, thank you so much. I appreciate having me on, Bryan, and thank you, Mark, too. We'll be talking this week.
Yep.
And anytime you want to come up, Bryan, just drop me a note. I'll try to make sure. I'm usually there 7 days a week, but sometimes we try to do a little RV trip or a little getaway.
Not a problem. I'll let you know in advance, and if you're not there, you're not there. But I may, if I'm going up, I'm staying for a little while. So I'll come back and forth.
Bring the fam, be my guest, and again, there's a lot of shopping around here too, so keep the family happy. Yeah, let them go.
We were there we were up in New Hampshire just before the Man on the Mountain broke.
Oh, 2003, I think it was. Yeah, 2000.
Yeah, that was one of the last times.
Yeah.
And then and we went up, and after you do that, go up to Mount Washington and go do the Race of the Clouds.
Oh yeah. Well, my son's an engineer, but he rally races, and he actually races up Mount Washington with Travis Pastrana and all those Block.
You guys are crazy.
Yeah,
No,
they
that's the problem. It's coming down. That's the problem.
Yeah, it is a little nerve wracking. I'll admit that. Yeah, they go up at an 80, come down a little slower, I think, because it's crazy. It's absolutely. I've driven up in it.
Yeah.
How 25 minutes to get up, but they go up in like 6 or 7 minutes. You know. So
my brother's Rottweiler. We were in his Jeep, and the Rottweiler was crying.
Oh no.
When he was
I think
he got real close to the edge.
I can understand why. Yeah.
We're like, Brad, pull it over a little bit.
But, Mark, you'll have to try that when you come up, Mark, next time.
I'm going to drag him up. I'm just going to come up from Florida, grab him, and
I'm kind of on the way.
West Virginia.
You're on the way. Yeah, come on up.
We'll cut across. Yeah, it'll be like a really weird Thelma and Louise.
Well, it's going to snow. It's going to snow in Mount Washington. They're going to get up to 6 inches, I think, tomorrow. So if you want to do a little, come on up now. You do a little skiing up there, you know.
Oh, it's hotter than the sun down here. I'll go up there and walk around in shorts. But thank you very much. God bless you, Dennis.
Yeah, thank you so much.
Family. Mark, thank you. And I always say to everybody else, if it wasn't for all of you, we wouldn't be here doing it. So we always end the show with my song, You. And I thank you very much and have a blessed week.
You, it's always been you. God showed me you. I have been searching decades for you. I found you, I lost you. My heart is broken without you. My soul aches for you. I need you, I want you. My days are filled with you. I've seen the future with you. My home is with you. I have felt the future with you. My nights are filled with you. Love is you. True love is you. My happiness is you. Every past life is with you. My dreams are filled with you. Life is meaningless without you. My future is with you. I will fight for you. I will defend you. I will give up my life for you. Whatever it takes for you. Nothing else matters but you. I love you. I love you. I love you. God showed me you. I have been searching decades for you. I found you, I lost you. My heart is broken without you. My soul aches for you. I need you, I want you. My days are filled with you. I have seen the future with you. My home is with you. I have felt the future with you. My nights are filled with you. Love is you, true love is you. Love is you, true love is you. My happiness is you. Every past life is with you. My dreams are filled with you. Life is meaningless without you. My future is with you. I will fight for you. I will defend you. I would give up my life for you. Whatever it takes for you, nothing else matters but you. I love you, I love you. Life is meaningless without you. My future is with you.